Welcome to our final episode of Why Blank Lost for Big Brother 25, or rather, Why Blank Won. I'm David Bloomberg, and with me one more time this year is, of course, my co-host, Ovi Kabir, who I thought was going to have two correct winner picks in a row, but it didn't quite go his way.
I know we lasted 100 days, and honestly, David, week by week, I got more confident that I was going to be a two picker. I don't even know if that's the right word, two picker. But I thought I was going to have two.
Good. No,
it doesn't sound good either. So we're going to cut that part. Two
Yeah.
winners picked Taylor and Matt, and that didn't happen. But I gotta say, I'm still happy with the results in a way. I don't know if you are. But what I'm most happy about is that we lasted 100 days because I feel like I was in the Big Brother house once again.
That's right. I mean, happy is, it's an interesting word. There are reasons to be happy. There are, reasons that I wouldn't have necessarily been happy with any of the final three. But it's Big Brother. What do you expect? I'm happier than let's say the person who won your season. But that's
a low bar, but
very low bar. I don't even want to compare Jag to that. So I apologize there, Jag. But anyway, another thing that's happy is it's your birthday week. So happy birthday week.
Thank you. It was, Big Brother gave me the present of giving us the reindeer games,
That's
so
right.
I am so excited that I'm going to be able to watch close to my birthday, the birthday reindeer games. Unfortunately, they left me out, David. I think my invite got lost in the mail.
Well, I mean, they haven't run them yet, so it's still possible.
Just true. Yeah. I think our segments really convinced them that I need to be on.
Yes, definitely. I want to mention that because we didn't do a special podcast for Felicia when she was eliminated Sunday, we have 4 people to talk about here. But we'll be evaluating them all in the usual way, comparing their play to the Big Brother rules I originally wrote in 2004 and have modified ever since. We'll look at what we saw on TV, live feeds, interviews, and other information. And of course, the most recent version of the rule is posted at robhasawebsite.com/bigbrotherrules. With that said, one of our normal podcasts goes an hour 15, hour and a half. Mm-hmm. We don't want this to be 4+ hours. So we are not going to be able to go into all the levels of detail that we normally would. Then again, on the other hand, one of the people we're discussing is Bowie Jane. So it's really only like talking about 3 people anyway. Still my point is that we'll hit the most important aspects, but we won't be giving every example. Like I went through my notes and I'm like, ooh, that's a good example. Ooh, that's a good example. Nope, can't use it. Don't have time. And since this was a 100-day game, some things have changed over the months anyway. I literally have full notes for a Why Jag Lost podcast because regular listeners may remember that I was certain Matt would not use the power on him way back when. And I was like, I'm going to get a jump on things. And then he stuck around. And then I was like, it's okay. I'll get to use him next week. No, I'll get to use him next week. No. And they obviously never came in. But so much of it is irrelevant now because when it came to why he won, because he turned it around and in some ways fixed it. And so, some examples may come up, but we're going to focus on what happened to cause his win. And that is, by the way, the W is for win. Fly the W for the win for Ovi. I do want to emphasize, and this is kind of in response to your earlier question, am I happy? What the rules and the bulk of this podcast is about what will get you the win. So if we criticize someone for playing poorly, we're not saying they're a bad person. We're saying they were a bad player. And the same is true in reverse. If we say someone was a good player or just say good things about them, we aren't necessarily saying they're a good person. There is a difference. And when we talk about the rules, we focus on the player.
Yeah, no, exactly. And I mean, I think Jag took it personally probably when he was in the Big Brother house and he knew you had those notes written for him. So not just for
Yes.
the win, he just wanted to prove you wrong, David. So you could never
Yes.
say those notes and have that come to light. But with that being said, I think it's really important that you mention that. I mean, the whole goal of what we do here is to have an objective look based on the rules you've created on how we can rate the players on what moves they've done. So I'm excited to kind of talk about each of the moves of each of these players because while there's similar games, there's a lot of different components here.
Yes.
But like you said, that when we talk about their game, it's not exactly talking about them as a person because we have many times said that we have thought some players have been entertaining on this season, but maybe to the disagreements of some of our viewers, we don't believe they're exactly the best game player.
Yeah. Yeah. And, just after saying that, we can move into the part where we do give our subjective thoughts, because these are the things that we discuss before we get to the rules. Since we have all Final Four players, and obviously there wasn't a whole lot going on in the house during this last week, the only thing I feel the need to mention is, unfortunately, Matt continued his misogynistic and frankly idiotic comments about especially America in the final week. And then, to make it worse, when he got out of the house, he tried to pass them off as jokes, just like so many jerks have in previous seasons when they've said things that definitely were not jokes. For those of you who may not already know, this include not only his comments about America seeming to be someone who would cheat on her boyfriend, but also saying America and Corey would be jealous because he got a letter from Riley, and then they'd have to propose on the finale to get attention back because they're jealous. A lot of projection in those comments. I know I said the word jealous twice, and that's because I think he was twice as jealous as he said they were. There is nothing at all funny about the things that he was saying, especially when it came to America and some of the other stuff. He came out and told Mike Bloom, "Oh, I make roasty comments to my friends. Ha ha." A roast is the whole point of a roast is literally to do it in front of them. This is not a roasty comment. This is something you said behind their back. It was not funny. And so, no, it's not a joke. Someone needs to educate this man quickly because he needs to realize what it is he's actually been saying.
Yeah, I think for me, from my perspective on these things, I try to give some of these house guests a little grace post show, so that they can kind of review because there's such a quick whiplash. They come out of the house, and I'm not justifying what they say or even the reactionary comments when they're talking about somebody asking these questions because I do think it's important. And there's kind of a parallel we had in Jag and Matt, how they answered the post interviews in this subject. But for Matt, I'm hoping that maybe you'll have a chance to kind of look back at some of the comments he made, have people see some things, be receptive of. I'm imagining people will tag him in different types of clips and probably his family or somebody just talk to him, and then he can kind of have a better outlook of what he said and actually respond in a proper way, in a way that appropriately takes on the onus of what he actually did and said in the house. Because the reason I say that is because we kind of had a parallel where you had Jag, right? Where people were asking him some things he said, how he acted in the house, how his last week, 2-week actions against Felicia and some of the other folks might have been looked at as bullying. And he talks about, hey, like that wasn't my intention whatsoever, but if that is what happened, I understand that, and I want to meet. He basically tried saying that he felt bad for that. He apologized for it. And he needs to take a better look at that. And I think actually we're probably gonna have Jag, the way we've seen his track record, discuss some of his behavior in ways. And by no means do I think Jag is on any plane close to what we've seen players before had.
Right.
I think there's some reactions a little overblown, some other things like that. But at the end of the day, you say what you say in there, and it's nice to be accountable and talk about it. So I think giving the a little grace to the house guests might go a little bit ways, but who knows? Well, we'll see.
And that's why I didn't mention Jag, because he did come out and acknowledge it and say, "Yeah, you're right." He is he seems to be a much more thoughtful individual in that way. He wasn't in there quoting Andrew Tate. Matt was.
Yeah.
So you could tell that Matt has a bit of a history of this sort of I'm not saying like he's some devotee. I mean, again, he is not the winner of your season. He is, but there are a lot of people out there who take certain things for granted, or even if they're not, part of like a core group of we hate these people, the way they talk about it promotes that. And the way he talks about women promotes a misogynistic view. And he needs to understand that. So I'm hoping that people close to him will talk to him. So when I say someone needs to educate him, I'm not suggesting everyone go on Twitter and start tagging him and going, Matt, you're this way. No, let the man learn from those who are close to him, hopefully.
Yeah.
So besides that, did you have anything else you wanted to talk about before we go to our next segment?
The only thing I'll say is really interesting, just as a whole, how this final three played out, where you had basically the Mafia, you had Bowie Jane, you had Jag, you had Matt, and we see a final three of people. I don't think we've seen a final three of everybody being happy that somebody else would win.
Yes,
I think they were all. And I'm not even saying this in a negative manner. I think it's cool.
I will.
I know you will. I know. I'm gonna take the devil's advocate of it. I think it was kind of interesting, maybe cool to see that just we had three people get to the end who felt that good about each other. Yes. I do think in another world, if they were all, it kind of makes me think of a Survivor parallel. They're not the same, but where you had Yam Yam.
Jam Carolyn and but of course Carson didn't make it to the final three, but Heidi,
but you if you take kind of Carson, they're all kind of happy if each other wins. They want to win obviously, but the fans love that about them because they like them as players.
But the difference is they all wanted to help each other, but they fought against each other.
Yeah,
I would say that Jag was definitely the jam in this situation because of the way, his final speech went much better. Now, there were reasons that Carolyn's speech didn't go as well. She did prepare. There were just, she thought the jury was going to look for something else. And also she, honestly got seasick on the way over and on the boat over and stuff like that. So there were other issues there, but, nobody there purposely took someone they knew was going to beat them. So that's, one big difference, which we will certainly get into. But before we get into why they're wrong about some of those things, it's time for the final edition this season of Julie Chen Moonves is Wrong About Brad. And first up is an interview that Julie did with Sharon Tharp before the finale. And she erased your friend Cliff because she said nobody who's returned has stayed more than a week or two.
Yeah, you know what? It's valid because I was going to say Cliff really didn't leave, but in the same shape or form, Jag didn't really leave.
Exactly. Either. She was comparing him to Jag, or she was comparing people to Jag. Now, I know everybody who's listening or watching, get off the floor. You're shocked that Julie might not remember things about previous seasons. I know that's hard to believe, but there it is. It's true.
There's a fog over BB21.
Yeah, well, that too. Then Julie ventured into the territory we're more familiar with when she agreed with those who said Big Brother is more of a social game. I was like, huh? And then she immediately went on and on about Jag's comp wins. So she has no idea what a social game even is. Yeah, it's like, yes, I love it when the sun is out staring up at the night sky. I mean, it's just no clue. And then she proved her lack of understanding when she said in a pre-finale interview with Pop Crave that she'd like to see Cameron get another shot at the game because, you guessed it, he appeared like an unstoppable comp beast and lasted for many weeks with no real allies working with him. And she called him impressive. Okay, so much for valuing the social game that she claimed, because she was literally impressed at him having no allies.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're seeing a trend too of we know we have comp beasts in the house because of the way competition has gone, but we have viewers enjoy it more. So because I think they're taking this data point where they're saying Cameron being an AFP, that this is what viewers want to see. We should do more comps, and we should also make sure comp beasts are known that they can come back on the show, because that will promote people to be comp beasts. I mean, it really feels like the Survivor Jeff probes, like make big moves, make play the game more, era.
The problem is Jeff goes out there and says make big moves, but then the players ignore him and they still play the correct way. The good ones. In Big Brother, production has changed things so they can't ignore it. And then they control what gets on TV. So it would be like if Jeff only showed the big moves, which hopefully he won't hear this and decide, hey, that's a good idea, David. But it's like you said, they take this data point, Cameron won AFP. Well, why did Cameron win AFP? Well, because you gave him such a great edit on TV compared to what he was actually doing. So they gave him the edit that allowed him to get AFP, and then they're like, oh, see, this is what people want. And it's like, look, just do your reindeer games and have that separate from the real Big Brother. If you want comps that much, just do that. Continuing in that interview, Julie also called Bowie Jane impressive, so she was throwing that word around, because she won 3 HOHs and nobody came after her. Julie, that's not impressive. That's because nobody cared. Why bother? And we even saw that in the finale, and of course we'll discuss it further here. But what Julie thinks of as impressive has nothing to do with reality. Then, one more wrong thing. She continued being wrong in a post-finale interview with Dalton Ross, where at first she said Jag's final speech was a little harsh. But then she said, I think that cost him Cerie's vote. Julie, there's no way Cirie effing Fields changed her vote at the last second because of Jag's speech. She was always voting for Matt. We all knew she was always voting for Matt. And, we'll obviously talk more about the speech and the jury later, much later, probably about 2 hours from now. But it was just a bizarre thing for Julie to say. Well, okay. I guess it's not that bizarre for her.
No, yeah, on point.
Yeah. All right. Well, with that, I was going to say, hopefully she won't say any more wrong things, before the next season. But the thing is, she just disappears. She goes into hibernation, because she doesn't talk about Big Brother when it's not on, because she doesn't think about Big Brother at all. So, hell, she doesn't think about it when it is on. Before we get to the rules, I do want to mention that the Survivor version is available in a shorter and much more colorful form as a poster. So you can go to RHAPhasawebsite.com/YXLostFeed, scroll down to the poster and click on it. In addition to the poster, you can also get that version as a t-shirt. So you can always wear it, have it with you. And you can get it as a checklist, which is very similar to the version of the rules that are applicable for Big Brother. So again, it's RHAPhasawebsite.com/YXLostFeed. Click away to your heart's content, order, and, wear and hang. You probably wear the t-shirt and hang the poster. But if you want to wear the poster and hang the t-shirt, you can do that too.
Versatile.
Yes. All right. Well, many people, including me, expected Matt to beat Jag in the end. But surprise, surprise, here we are with the opposite result. How did that happen? And where did each of the final four do the right thing or go wrong to end up where they were? What should they have changed? After 100 days, it's finally time to figure out why Jag won and Matt, Bowie Jane, and Felicia lost. We start with the first and what should be the most important rule, which is to scheme and plot. Now, I truly believe Jag knew how important this is because very early on, he talked about wanting to create what was essentially an onion alliance. So it had different layers. But knowing and doing are two different things. And it took him a while to figure it out. It might be said he never truly figured it out, considering that he took his biggest competition to the end rather than going for the easy win with Bowie Jane. But in the early game, he was so clueless that I posted a TikTok about him with Michael Jackson's I'm Bad as the background music. And it was true. He was excessively loyal and gullible. Melissa said on the Stockwatch roundtable that week, he could not connect the dots. He seemed to be smart and know what to do, but he couldn't put it all together. And even in some of his interviews, he's acknowledged this. He's been like, oh my God, I played so bad in those days. Even after he would have been evicted, he still kept believing and trusting people he shouldn't. But he lucked out several times, not only including Matt's power, but also the decision to evict Red, because Red made one statement indicating he might eventually find out about Jared's lies. So Jag continued being a target, but then once he started winning comps, there was nothing anybody could do about it. He was only vulnerable twice for more than half the game thanks to his comp wins. This was not strategic genius. There just wasn't anything anyone could do.
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting to see his game as a whole from the beginning to the end, because in one aspect you can say he completely turned it around because he won the game. I mean, he was initially voted out at one point, but also too, he took a level of strategy that went through the game in a different pathway that is very difficult to replicate. I mean, I don't even want to say he comped out, because I do think, I mean, there's a level of it, but his strategy was in regards to that. And we always say that there's different parts of power dynamics. When you strategize, when you're on the bottom and you have no power, or when you strategize when you're safe and you have power. And so the interesting thing is, we saw Jag, the way he played those initial weeks, he was like a warrior. He just didn't have the immunity to kind of help him make those strong, beeline decisions. I mean, he was very vocal about who he would go after. And if he felt that he was burnt, he was like, I'm not. I mean, and we look at when he was initially voted out, even though he was saved by Suri and Matt, he was still running his mouth shortly after saying that I want basically Suri. I don't trust Suri. I don't like her. He comes back out her, and then he becomes prime target again. He doesn't change this mode too much from the way he becomes a little smart. But the thing, what happens is that the size of selection of other people start dropping down. They dwindle, right? We have less players, and he gets that level of immunity through vetoes or HOH competitions. And we see this level of strategy that he can implement because he's in a safe place. So we just haven't seen this type of action really replicated outside of, I would say, probably in the most recent seasons, Jackson Mickey from BB21, where we see somebody really dominate their comp wins. So it was an interesting take, and I don't know if this is kind of a new meta going on, but it takes a certain player to be able to implement this.
Yeah, I mean, he, like you said, he still had, early on his strategic flubs, but they were covered by either him winning comps or Matt smoothing things over, as we'll discuss later. But once they got Bowie Jane to evict Cameron, it was basically like they got on a sled at the top of a hill and just rode it down. And because it's like you said, the strategy that they chose when they decided to evict, they focused on comp threats. And normally I wouldn't necessarily say this is a good game move. You should go according to relationships, not comps. But the way Big Brother has trended, it ended up being correct. And I think I've mentioned on a previous podcast, I may have to, modify my rules a bit until and unless production fixes this. And, in any case, getting rid of other people who would win comps, it allowed them to maintain control of the HOHs and the vetoes. We saw the clip of Suri saying when she arrived at the jury that Jag's wins didn't impress her because he was, quote, playing against 2 senior citizens, 1 airhead, and 1 idiot. As much as I love that quote, we do have to acknowledge that it was that way for a reason. We talked about it on previous podcasts, that their strategy was to vote out people based on their perceived threat level when it came to comps. And Jag even told Mike Bloom, in terms of most competitions won, that was honestly a byproduct of the game I was playing. And I have to say that another thing is, in this house, it has been difficult to determine who is really on your side, especially for Jag. He's never had a good way of determining it. So In that situation, it does make sense to target those who do better in comps and that therefore not rely on them. If you're in a big alliance and you are all solid with each other, then if one person wins, another person wins, it's not as important. When you're in a bunch of little duos, then it becomes more important because any of those duos could flip on you. So you got to get rid of them.
Yeah, no, exactly. I mean, this is why Jag won,
Hey, no
objectively.
skipping to the end. We got another 2 hours here.
Objectively speaking, we might prefer to see a way they win, but he cares about how he wins, and he won in this strategy that he implemented. And just twofold, so I want to talk about this a little bit too. It's interesting that there's such a disparity, right, between these competition beasts and lesser competition beasts in the house. And so as he gets some of the people who are the closest to him, one by one, he's able to increase that disparity, which is a true and tried strategy of what we're seeing. My question, we just don't have enough data points at this point within the game, because again, this change we're seeing is more of a recent thing. Competitions winners like this becoming actual winners is a less frequent thing. So it's hard to say how well and replicable the strategy is. But also I want to talk about the strategy that they come into a trio of between him, Bowie Jane.
Okay, before you do, I just want to I don't want to lose the point that you just made about the data points.
Yeah.
One problem with the data points is there are other things thrown in. It's hard to do. Like no one else in history has been able to win HOH twice in a row. And so you have that on top of being a comp beast. You also have these stupid twists in there that even further help the comp beasts. And so it's, it's difficult to, to look at the data. But, when Terran has looked at the data, and I will, give full credit to Terran for doing so, he has plotted out and looked at, and I think other people have too. I don't want to take away from anyone who has, but, just to show how the comps have changed and how, the comp beasts have emerged. So sorry, going.
No, it's a good point. I mean, overall too, in the sense that we don't know. So we know, there's always going to be almost every season there's a double eviction, and then some seasons there's a triple eviction. We are starting, like, the players are trying to foresee, when there's going to be a non-eviction. I mean, because you have 100 days. If you know the game, like Corey, who mapped it out, knows that essentially this is how it should be potentially. But you have this weird twist where we saw Corey being a part of it. Jag, can the outgoing HOH play again? It's very difficult to plan for that because you never know. Right. So when you have these wrenches, I mean, again, this goes with our rules down the line, is how you have to be flexible with this. But scheming and plotting for that becomes very difficult to put that in your strategy itself, because you never know when that's going to show up.
Right.
But to that second point I was going to say before, I think it's impressive. And that's where I think a lot of the strategy, we talk about a strategy of Jag eliminating threats one by one. But I also think it's important to note that strategy of building that trio, working together, because truly Matt and Jag can't do what they did unless they brought Bowie Jane in. I mean, she played an integral part of, yes, we disagree, like, where it should have been, she should have probably cut them, but they put in the work that she wouldn't cut them. And I think that level of strategy was impressive to see kind of going to endgame, because they saw something that other players didn't. And that was valuing somebody on the outside.
Yeah. And the thing is, you can't count on having, and God, I hope we never do, you can't count on having a Bowie Jane in your season to use like that, because it was basically having a mannequin, doing, a very smiley mannequin to do your bidding. And whoever, won the mannequin, I mean, we've talked before about someone just being, someone else's second vote, but this was true. I mean, it was, that's, she was there, and, I'll have more to say about that later. But one difference, we talked about comp beasts, and of course, Cameron, we talked about him being a comp beast. And one difference between the two was that, as Cherie pointed out in the little bit of the jury roundtable we got to see, Cameron had a terrible social game. And he agreed. And then he agreed in his interviews, and yet I still have cam stands commenting on my videos being like, no, he didn't. It's like, he admitted it. Go watch. But but that wasn't the issue I wanted to bring up here. It's that Cameron also had a terrible strategic game in that he didn't really work with anyone. And the two things are closely related for him. His lack of a social game also was related to his lack of a strategic game. But for Jag, they're more separate. Now, we'll obviously talk about his social game later, but as far as his strategic game, he had something that Cameron didn't. Allies. He and Matt had been together for a long time. And then, like you said, they brought in Bowie Jane. So on those rare occasions when Jag couldn't or didn't win comps, one of them did. Matt or Bowie Jane did, and kept him safe, because in that season of shifting alliances, you just mentioned it, they stayed loyal to each other. So, yeah, if, like you said, if you can find people like that, great. But, I mean, I want to say it's rare, but unfortunately it's not, because we've seen it before, I mean, Cody and Derek and, some other ones. It should be rare. Everyone should always be looking out for themselves, but obviously it's not as rare as we might hope.
Yeah, I mean, I think, it's difficult to see from a cast from the beginning of it who can it be as a player, but there's probably going to be a player who is on this every cast where they can be somebody who is an extra vote, or somebody who is going to be just there for the experience. And at the end of the day, when the win comes to it, they wouldn't mind handing it over.
Right.
I will say, I think it's hilarious. And I was trying not to laugh too much while you're talking. It's like, Cameron will get a shot taken at him no matter what. David's gonna throw out something at him, and I think it's just funny. I think it's very good comparison though with the Cameron and Jag point of it. And one thing I want to note with it is that I think Jag played a very good foil. That was kind of his mid-game strategy when he came back against the Syrian Co. And it's impressive how he was able to paint such a target on other people as a strategy, even though they weren't winning things. People knew that Felicia, Suri, Nicole, they didn't really have as much competition prowess as other people. And even though Jag was safe, he was able to make sure that Bowie Jane, and then this was a combination, and Matt, some of his allies weren't targeted in the mix. I mean, it was kind of a one group versus others, and they were able to also hide behind that Corey and America line. So by the time Corey and America were gone, Jag and Matt were really in such a wonderful position. They played that middle in a good way. So I think it's really cool to see Jag implement certain strategies to help his overall strategy of get anybody out who I see will be an issue for me moving forward versus because the thing we can say that Jag didn't play was a passive game once he got back into the house. He really was full on.
True. And he did have strategies. I would never call him the strategic mastermind that he claimed to be in his final speech, but he did learn some things. As just a few examples, when he was nominated way back when, Red won the veto. He went and he talked to Red and he said, Red, I would never ask you to do something that you don't want to do. And so he didn't even try to put any pressure on him. I remember everybody going crazy at the time. Like, he could have revealed these alliances. He had all this information. And instead, he was just like, Red, do what you're going to do. Fast forward to later in the game, he and Matt wanted to convince Cameron of who to evict. So he guided Cameron the way he wanted by telling him certain things and withholding other things. Then, when Bowie Jane was HOH and he wanted Cameron evicted, he pushed Bowie Jane and only gave her certain information, found out what she wanted to hear and told it. Then Matt becomes HOH. He wants Matt to put up Suri, and he puts pressure on Matt. So he did eventually learn some of the aspects that he did not get early on. But overall, most of his moves were due to having won a comp and therefore having power. That said, he played the game put in front of him by the producers, and he was lucky that it was right up his alley. That also helped, that plus his own decisions, plus Matt's decisions, made him more the face of the alliance. So he got credit for moves, whether he was the one who made them or not. For example, Cameron told Mike Bloom, Jag made the absolute most moves between the two of them. And then he added to Dalton Russ. I believe that he had the most control over his game. I believe that he had the most planning opportunity, though Matt definitely came through with him in a lot of times with a lot of competitions and a lot of the execution of the plans. Jag walked the whole thing home. He knew piece by piece exactly what he wanted to do. Cameron's giving Jag more credit than I would. Because that's Cameron presuming to know Jag's mind. It's not really what we saw. I mean, remember, this is right out of the jury house, you know. The actual situation between Matt and Jag was that for most of the game, Matt almost always got the outcome he wanted. You know, even though Jag would win the comps, Matt would more direct what they did. He would be the navigator. Sometimes they agreed to begin with, sometimes not. You know, but for example, Jag didn't initially want to send out Corey in America quick at that time, but Matt convinced him. Going back in time, Jag didn't want to get Cameron out when he did, but Matt convinced him. And then that led to, like I said, Jag going to Bowie Jane. Once he was convinced, he took the actions, but he had to be convinced. And this continued until Final Five when things were finally reversed. And Matt won HOH, but Jag, as I mentioned, pushed him to a vote to evict. Oh my gosh, I just did a Derek to evote. To evict Suri. But no matter who got their way, Matt stayed in the background usually, and he let Jag appear to be the one making the move, which does take us to the special corollary within Rule 1, which says as much as players need to keep their scheming on the down low, they have a balancing act. They shouldn't keep it so secret that the jury doesn't really know that they were playing the game and punishes them for that when it comes time to vote for the winner. Because Jag was out front while Matt was quieter, Jag was presumed to be the decision maker, and I really do think Matt paid the price for that.
I don't disagree with you on this one. You know, I think going into it, it's a strange thing because it's kind of like Matt truly played close to a perfect game in a lot of ways, in the sense that of playing lay low, never being in danger. I mean, the only time he was put on the block, I mean, to his words too, was right at the end, essentially when Jag made that decision. If Matt wins that final competition, he basically had his control of his fate for the entirety of the game, something that's a very complete opposite to Jag. And so I think a lot of us were viewing this as this might be I don't want to say a layup because I think Jag's competition abilities, and we saw for sure, were held in high esteem. But in all other cases, Matt played in such a well-rounded game that he would be seen as a win, and he won competitions too. So he won a good amount of competitions. So you had the social element of Matt compared to Jag there, but Jag being so kind of the face of the brand,
right?
You know, you remember, you don't remember the CEO or the other people of a brand. You remember the mascot, and I don't want to liken that in a negative way to Jag. I mean, he owned it. You know, he owned the game, and even at the final jury speech, and I think David and I will talk about that down the line. He really tried to say, "This, everything of this is mine. This is what I did. This is who I am, and this is why I deserve to win." Versus Matt, we saw that represent more of kind of his cool, chill nature throughout the whole game.
Yeah.
So,
part
of the strategy. Part of the, you know, at the end of the day, became part of the strategy.
Right. And yeah, as you know, we can kind of continue with Matt here. You know, he started out early by acting like like you said, cool, chill, just hanging out and having fun. But then he quickly realized, certainly quicker than Jag, that he was on the outs, and he pulled himself together. You know, he saw an opportunity to get in close with Suri and went after it. And from there, he slowly got himself in good with almost everybody. You know, Corey noted at one point that Matt was trusted by almost all of them, and Corey included himself in that. So even when he saw it, he was still, you know, part of it. A lot of this goes to the social game we'll discuss later, but it seemed to be actual strategic planning on Matt's part.
Yeah, I mean, we saw, I wonder, you know, how much of, because I don't want to take away from Matt in this point, but I wonder how much his relationship with Suri started influencing a lot of his game decisions in a way that where we saw kind of a wall right here. And you had Jag on one side of the wall where he was with the group, on the other side of American Corey and other people. And then you had Matt on the other side of the wall where he was close to Suri, and he could be a bit of a microphone and make certain moves. Suri might be whispering and he could kind of do them in action. And I wonder how much that spurred him. But overall, it was really interesting to see kind of a silent assassin that Matt was. Also, I mean, again, I think we would be remiss to say this without just putting it like Matt played a game in a House of Whispers where he talks about where this is incredibly difficult about for his whole experience of everything he's had to go through. So I think just that level of impressiveness, and because I don't want to say it's a barrier in the real life for him, but it's something you have to work around. But in the Big Brother house, I think he will self-note that it was a barrier,
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that necessarily deals with the strategy of it, but yes, it was definitely a barrier that he had to overcome.
But I do think it actually plays with the strategy. The only reason I say that because he has to curate his game towards that. It has to be
I guess I think I get to it in being flexible because he had but yes, you're right. He did have to adjust his strategy because adjust the strategy of the game because of it.
Yeah.
Now, we already discussed how Matt took the lead in most of the strategy that we were just talking about for a big chunk of the game. And another good example of this was when Jag was getting too curious. You mentioned this already about the power that was used to save him and how much of a role Suri played in it. So he was going around questioning everyone. And Matt was like, oh my God, what is going on here? So he brings Suri and Jag together and they end up in a 3-person alliance. Now, was it ever real? Between Suri's mist and Matt bringing them together, Jag finally shut up about it. Another example was that Matt convinced Jared to go after Cameron after the blow up and the flip against Izzy. And he helped protect Jag. A lot of the blame got deflected there. So, Matt was mostly the one doing these things while Jag benefited. Matt told Mike Bloom also that he told people what they wanted to hear. And so that was another part of it, aside from, the protecting and the deflecting, was he knew he wasn't going to win HOH. So he didn't have to worry about breaking promises. He could say, I won't put you up. And that was never tested. It would be like me, telling a little kid, well, as soon as we get to Antarctica, I'll make you a snowman. Well, okay, guess what? We are never getting to Antarctica. So, I mean, finally, eventually in Final 5, that did happen with Suri, and he had promised her that, and then he did put her up, and she did give it. But by that time, it didn't matter anymore.
Yeah, I mean, at that point of the game, you see, you have to put somebody up, and then we even see Suri still say, I felt like you kept my trust, and gave him the vote. Ultimately, one thing I think is interesting with the whole Matt Jag relationship with Suri, that it was Matt. I don't know if it's because also Jag was voted out, right? So he felt like he was kind of a new life. We talk about it before. He was a phoenix, essentially. So he was the one, when he saw something kind of amiss, he called it out or acted quite quickly on that, in the sense of he stopped trusting Suri, especially with the whole Jared situation, when Suri told Jared something, and then Jared basically tries to hold it over about the coming back to Jag. And so Jag is like, how do you know that I was saved? What this power was used on me, or etc., things like that, or it's going to be used on me? Then he questions Suri because of the relationship that she has with Jag or with Jared. She's like lies to him. He knows something's amiss. So you see him then that kind of dictate now that pathway he was going to take. But you had Matt on the other end trying to smooth it over. So I wonder if some people, and we talk about this initially, that and it's very ironic to say it, but I think, David, you and I talk about it shortly after Jag blows up like this. He's back in that house, that everyone wants to take Jag to the end because now they feel like he's been voted out. He's somebody they can beat. It shouldn't be a difficult thing. Versus Matt having to play a lay low type of game where no one viewed him, or the way he played his strategy, he was able to be so good with other people, they wouldn't consider putting him up.
Yeah, you know, and I don't know. I don't remember. I'm not saying it's wrong. I just don't remember in this long game that people saying, yeah, we want to take Jag to the end because he'll be easy to beat. Maybe it happened right away, but I mean, he was the target again right away. He made himself the target again right away, in part by doing all this questioning and not learning his lesson. So, and, you know, I mean, I think Matt really did protect him in those early times. And Jag perhaps didn't give Matt enough credit for that when it happened, you know, but it could be said, and I think indeed it was by Matt, that Matt's biggest move was using the power to save Jag. And he said in interviews that he did it to show he was loyal and also to keep Jag around as a shield. So if the two of them ended up on the block together, Jag would be the one going home. Now, that ignores the fact that Jag almost always won the veto in those situations, and therefore Jag wouldn't have gone home. But hey, you know, I understand what Matt was saying about that.
I mean, it's just in a good strategy. I mean, here's the thing: is when you replicate it, if you play this game over 100 times, if Matt continues to use the same strategy, he basically has a great way to the end, and he has such a shield next to him. He just needs to win the final 3 competition or have a relationship with Bowie Jane in which she would cut Jag and, you know, not win the veto.
But I mean, yeah, you say he needs to win the final 3 competition. He needs to win the final 3 competition and cut Jag.
Yeah, and cut Jag. Yeah.
He was saying in his interviews he wasn't going to. So winning the final 3, I don't think he would have.
You don't think he would have cut Jag?
No, we'll get to it. We'll get to it later, but no. So yeah, speaking of Bowie Jane, because you brought up her name, I felt originally like I wouldn't really have much to say about her in this rule because Bowie Jane didn't want anything to do with this rule. She didn't want to scheme and plot. She just wanted to hang out and have fun. But then I realized I actually do have some things to say about where she went wrong. I'll narrow it down, I promise. But to start, I still think her actions from 3 months ago best exemplify how she did in this rule. When Felicia goes into the comic room and says, we need to create the bye-bye bitches. And Bowie Jane gets up and leaves and says, yeah, I want to work with you, but not be in an alliance. And it didn't make sense. And she never made sense from that point on. You know, throughout the season, Bowie Jane kept being surprised there was actually a game going on. You know, after the red vote, she said she didn't realize it had to get dirty by lying this early. And Cirie fired back that anyone in the room should stand up if they haven't lied yet. Well, even Bowie Jane had lied while she pretended she hadn't. You know, and Cirie and Felicia called her out on that. Like, she hadn't told Red and Cameron everything. And, of course, what they didn't know was she was lying about her own occupation and age. Now, in her mind, those weren't real lies, quote unquote. You know, but, you know, so they didn't count. But everybody else's lies were terrible. When Corey was trying to either save himself or at least help America before he left, he told Felicia a plan to lie to Bowie Jane. This is obviously fast forwarding a lot, which Felicia then stupidly spilled to Bowie Jane. Bowie Jane cried and cried and cried because of the lying. Even that far into the game, she still couldn't deal with it. She still insisted. She thought Big Brother could be played with honesty. And look, I agree. Big Brother can be played with honesty. It just can't be won with honesty.
You know what? I feel so many ways about Bowie Jane. I think a lot of it's been said, but what I will say about Bowie Jane, she got her got. All right. She played the game and got her revenge on each of these players. Wasn't a winning game, but more than anything, I think if it's a battle of attrition, Bowie Jane is there to last. She played a game of 300 days, and that's the issue right here, that it was a slow game and she didn't want to cut it because she was waiting for day 40. That would be day, like, what, in retrospect, day 10 or so in the Big Brother. Like, she was playing such a long-term game where it was one of let's wait and see. Let's strategize as it eventually comes to some. We see the end game and where she wins those 3 competitions. She utilizes it in a way to basically benefit those 3. Because I think the issue playing with somebody like Bowie Jane is that they're not trying to play to win. At that point, they're trying to play to prove their point. She did not care at that point when she was getting them one, because I think for her, it felt better. That 750K would not feel anywhere close to the good feelings it was to get the people who she viewed who were bullying her one by one by one. And so
bullying her by, playing the game.
Yeah, I mean, but it comes down to, we've talked about it's like icing players out. And I think Bowie Jane will be a perfect example and a warning to future players you should make sure you value every single house guest out there, especially somebody who isn't a negative to you. The way these house guests, because from Felicia, Sari, and other people, they treated Bowie Jane in a way like she was dispensable. She could be rid of. They didn't care about her.
Yeah, but remember, they tried to include her, and she got up and walked out of the room.
But you have to adjust, I mean, that's the thing is if you see a player like that, then you got to find, because Matt and Jag did though, it's
eventually,
doable.
I mean, when she went through everyone else, I mean, and that's part of the problem is that she never fully understood the whole idea of alliances. Early November, just like a couple weeks ago, not even on the live feeds, she told Felicia that she was confused the first few weeks in the house because there was a lot of things going on that she didn't know about. Yeah, no kidding. It went back to her simplistic idea of the game based on her belief that there were 2 sides. And indeed, she kept talking about our side and the other side for months. No, I mean, we talked about that already. It was so much more complicated than that this season, especially when Mike Bloom asked her what she meant when she said that other people, quote unquote, cheated. She said, I wish I could do an Australian accent to do this, but I can't. So she said, at the start, I didn't realize that people would be in more than one alliance. I didn't realize people were in 40 alliances. So that was the kind of stuff I was talking about, like with Sari and Izzy and Mama Felicia and Mimi being in different alliances. So that says so much right there. To her, being in multiple alliances is, quote, cheating.
It's monogamous. She's,
Yeah. Yeah. Talk to Matt. It's a cheating vibe. I mean, no, that's the way you play the game. And we also heard her talk to Corey on the live feeds about how she thought alliances were much simpler. And that's what she was looking for, to go back to your point. She wanted some people to take her in, make her feel like she was part of the team, be solid, no side alliance, no backup alliance. She really viewed it like a team sport. Like if you're playing a game of baseball, okay, it's clearly your team against their team. You don't have a side deal with the first baseman on the other side. And she could not wrap her head around the fact that this is not a baseball game. There are no teams. She did somehow end up in multiple alliances, but I'm not sure that she ever felt any of them were real until Matt and Jag.
Yeah, that's the tough thing about her game, because I feel like, there's a quick look you can look at it, you can glance at it and say, this is just objectively not a winning game by any means. But I think it's interesting to look a step further, like we are doing right here, and say why. Why is it not a winning game? And it's because she's playing by a different set of rules here. Her goal isn't to win the game. Her goal is essentially to play a big brother that we haven't seen since season 1, where it is truly you have a side, you stick with it, and you just go with the thing. So I wonder if her experience would change at all if she knew anything going in, or if she played it differently. Again, I just don't see it, and I just don't see a route for her. I mean, the only route we actually mentioned, and we still disagreed about this too, was whether it was Felicia and her at the end. If Bowie Jane basically won out, cuts Matt, cuts Jag, and she's at the end. So at that point, she's cut Matt, she's cut Jag, she's cut America, and she's cut Cameron. Does she win over Felicia? If
she then says, I will grant you this, because I thought about it afterwards. If she then gets up there in her final words, and she also says in her goodbye messages, I have been secretly running this game the whole time. She pulls a Jag at the end. I have your blood all over my hands. I am a lawyer. I am a prosecutor. You thought I was just some dumb DJ. I have been playing you this whole time. If she does that in her goodbye messages and then she wins out and cuts those people and says it, then yes, she wins. But the problem was that wasn't her. She never intended to. That she'd be a whole different person at that point.
I just got shivers. All right, I got goosebumps thinking of that reality, because that's a killer Bowie Jane.
I mean, we'll get to it later, but she basically said in her interviews that everything she did with intention. Again, we'll get to that in the interviews, a little later, because that's just insane. But once continuing the trend here, so we could put her behind us on this first rule. Once she got onto the Mafia team, it still didn't actually improve her game skills. She was nothing more than a number to be brought along, win the occasional comp, cast a vote the way she was told, evict who she was told to evict. She wouldn't even express an opinion. And that was why I said on an earlier podcast, it might have been last week, that she wanted to know what was happening. She didn't want to be involved in the decision. She just wanted to know what the decision was, because she didn't even care about the decision when she should have. And the most egregious example of this was when Jag was trying to get her to give her thoughts about cutting Matt at Final Four. He's like, what do you think? What do you think? And she's like, whatever you think. It's fine. Ha ha. She was happy no matter what. Even though if Jag had cut Matt, it would have given her at least second place money. But no, that didn't matter to her. Even when she was actually voted out, she just left with a laugh and a smile.
I've been on my binge recently of The Sopranos, so maybe in this world, she was Tony Soprano. She wanted the other folks. She didn't want the blood on her hands. She knew the RICO was coming down on her. She knew she needed to make sure she had no ties to the blood there. I don't have your blood on your hands. I made everyone else have it. So maybe that was her goal.
Okay, sure. All right, well, let's move on to Felicia. And the more I look back, the more I wonder what her actual strategic game was. She was in the center of so many alliances earlier. And of course, she was the one who even instigated some of them. But throughout the months she was there, I'm not sure what her plan was. I mean, what do you think?
This is a tough one, because this sounds mean in saying this, but I do think, I don't know if she had a plan to go at the end. I think that was kind of the issue we saw. That objectively, when we look at her game, she was really working alliances, and that was where she flourished in ways, kind of being part of it. And yes, I know she rubbed people the wrong ways in certain ways, but you're going to rub people the wrong ways when you're there for 100 days. Felicia was one of our oldest house guests in the house. I think she might have been the oldest one. Yeah. I think there was an impressive level of to be able to strategize, plot with other people who are completely different age ranges and different life experience. And she did a good way of utilizing what she could do there. The issue is I don't think she had a mode of how do I push my game forward without other people pushing the train forward. When Sari they had their issues, she stopped away. She couldn't get to Jared. Nicole was gone. And then it started to unravel for her. So she was never able to take a good tackle point and make something happen. I mean, we see that all with Corey. I mean, Corey in America's situation where she's getting mad at him. She didn't attempt to make new alliances as the game would go by. And you need that.
Yeah. I plan to talk about that a little later. But yes, absolutely. Because she was, of course, on the block more times than anyone else. And several times she was the intended target, but got away clean. Other times she was indeed just a pawn. But either way, it doesn't speak well to her having strategic power in the game. And as far as what you were talking about, we saw her doing things that most Big Brother players wouldn't, like directly confronting people, which was so shocking in the early goings that people would just spill to her because they weren't expecting to be directly questioned, But I feel like that led to her believing almost everything that people told her even as the game went on and people got wise to it, which gave her a pretty bad read on the house overall. And never was this more evident than the last few weeks when she was absolutely certain that she and Cirie had a solid Final Four with Matt and Jag. She just kept repeating it over and over. And no matter how many times the guys would do things to show that they were actually in the mafia with Bowie Jane, instead, she would just say, that's a weird thing for him to do, given that we have a Final Four. Why are you nominating me since we have a Final Four? Why aren't you doing this to Bowie Jane? So, it's like, stop it already. It didn't matter. She never stopped believing. She took that faith of a mustard seed and put it in Jag and Matt. And, she insisted that Jag was more loyal to her than anyone else. She would even say things like she didn't understand why Matt couldn't be a pawn instead of her if they were all, on equal standing. And it's like, no, Felicia, just no.
Yeah, I think the sad part too was maybe we could see a little bit more of authority she had in the game if she won those competitions that Bowie Jane essentially won, which were kind of toss-ups, and we saw Felicia being close to the end, and I wonder how much would have changed if she was able to kind of steer the power control, because she was not winning any of those other competitions. She was not going to be able to win any of the physical competitions we saw that were on there. I mean, those were just being dominated. The disparity of level of competition and ability was just out of there. So you need to win what you can win. She wasn't able to do that, and ultimately too, we see, I come kind of back to Bowie Jane. I know Bowie Jane kind of had that rejection of that line stare, and I think Felicia took that personally in a way, but we never see a personal relationship build between Felicia and Bowie Jane in a way that could fruition to something else. I mean, that was somebody who truly was kind of preying on her downfall throughout the end of the game. Yes. And she needed some other allies to kind of work with, and she just didn't have them.
Yes. Now, we did, of course, see Felicia trying to throw Cirie under the bus by telling Jag and Matt some information and oftentimes misinformation about her. And some of this even went back to Cirie trying to set her straight on the whole Final Four thing. Like, Cirie is like trying to explain to her, the Final Four isn't real. Get it through your head. And then she runs to Jag and says, Cirie says the Final Four thing isn't real. It's just, oh my God. She wanted to make sure within that Final Four that didn't exist, that she was the final three. But, I mean, at least she fought for her game the whole time. And that's certainly more than we can say about some players this season.
That is true. I mean, one thing I would say, this is a very unique Final Four we had. I mean, if you looked at this cast from the very beginning and say, Felicia, Bowie Jane, Jag, and Matt, this is your Final Four, I'll be like, that's a very unique. It's a diverse group of people.
You crazy.
Yeah.
I don't know what this
I would have lost all my money. I would not bet any of it on there. So again, it's one of those things. Is like you get to the end. How do you play out this game? And we just saw the issue with Matt and Jag were in the driver's seat throughout the whole end game of this stuff, because also competition wins one thing, but all the players, it was like their fathers. You're like say, what do I do? You go to them and say, what do I do? Like, how should I play this stuff? They are making the rules and you're playing around, and that's just not a winning game.
Yeah. All right. Well, we can finally leave this rule and move into the second rule, which says not to scheme and plot too much and to keep your scheming secret. Now, I'd like to continue with Felicia, because part of her telling so much information to Matt and Jag was her telling too much information to Matt and Jag, and sometimes to others. Indeed, of the Final Four, she was the worst in terms of this rule. I had already mentioned how Corey tried to help her set up a plan for the future, and she immediately spilled it all to Bowie Jane and wrecked the whole thing. She just could not keep her mouth closed about anything. Months ago, Jared told Corey that Felicia was losing trust because she was running her mouth too much. And around the same time, I remember a conversation on the live feeds when Cirie talked to Corey on the hammock and was mentioning how Felicia said everything to everyone. Then, when the follow-up attempt to get her out at that point failed, they talked again later about the same thing, and Cirie emphasized how Felicia would build something up as if the person she was talking about said something and then tell people that's what happened. And it's funny because I actually had some coworkers like this. I had one in particular. She was a troublemaker, and she would like go to someone's office and be like, they'd be talking, and then she'd say something like, "Oh yeah, David, he just gives us too much work to do, and he makes us too busy." And if the other person just kind of nodded to be polite, she would then run back to me. I was her boss, and say, "Pam's over there complaining that you're giving her too much work."
That's wild.
Yeah, it didn't take long to figure out that was what was happening. Felicia is similar here. She would either just make things up out of whole cloth, or if someone just kind of agreed with her, she'd act like they were the ones saying it. And, Corey saw it happening himself because he had an agreement with, and not that exact situation, but like just her talking. He had an agreement with her and America and Nicole to protect each other. And then all of a sudden everybody knew about it. And so he and America had to deny it, but there was no way Felicia should have even been talking about it. And this went on and on. There were other examples where sometimes she spread things that were actually said. Sometimes they weren't actually said. And what I found really funny was, I think in a few cases, she thought she heard things that weren't actually said, but then she spread them. So I think it may have just been a misunderstanding, a misperception, coupled with her urge to tell the whole house. Because there were a couple times when she was insisting, this is what the person said, and everybody else is like, no, that's not what we said. And there were flashbacks showing, no, that's not what was said. But she was still insisting it.
I mean, I think it comes down to like the examples you said, but I think we had an argument, actually. It wasn't this week, but it was last week. Our viewers and listeners might remember when I was saying that I believe that it might be in the best nature for Cerie's game for her to tell Felicia about the secret between her and Jared, because that would kind of help their bond there. And your argument was, no.
I told you were crazy.
Yeah, I was crazy. Yeah, you said because the whole house would know that in literally 30 seconds, Felicia would go around and tell people. I mean, that was the issue, is that you couldn't cement, Cerie couldn't cement her bond with Felicia because she was worried that, hey, you're going to spill all the information. I mean, she would overwork and overscheme when really unneeded. She's in a trio at this point, or actually in a quad between her, Nicole, Jared, and Cerie at one point. And she goes to Jared and says, I want to work with you to the final two. Jared goes back to Cerie. That causes and says, hey, this is what she said. That causes, like, there was no need to do that at that point. I mean, we see her take a whole backlash when she feels like she can't trust Cerie. And then she starts talking to Nicole about, I really don't want to work with them. That kind of basically gets out. You just see her self-destroy a lot of relationships early game, where then Cerie, who would have been and could have been her closest ally throughout the whole game, just feels some sort of way about her because she's like, I can't trust you. And that's what happened for Felicia. Her over scheming and overworking on different types of angles really made it so that no one could ever believe anything from her, but also trust her to be a true ally.
Yeah, I mean, even Cameron said it at one point. Now, Cameron, not known exactly for his social game or, like I mentioned, getting allies, but he one time told her to her face, like, you ask why I won't tell you anything. It's because the minute I tell you something, it will be spread all over the house. Now, Mike Bloom asked Felicia about all of this, and she acknowledged that she did reveal a lot of information that was provided to her by Cerie and others, but she supposedly only did it when she felt the need. It seems like she felt the need like all the time, but she admitted that it sometimes worked for her and sometimes against her. So at least she had some recognition that it, didn't always work out for her, which is more than some of the players have in terms of recognition. Now, leaving her and switching back to Jag and Matt, I want to treat them as a duo in this rule because the main thing that they did to draw attention here was being a duo. The thing is, this house was filled with duos. So while that could set them apart in a different game, it really didn't here. It should have made them more noticeable, more threatening. But the other duos drew attention away from them. And some of their own gameplay helped avoid it as well. Like they talked about something I mentioned a few minutes ago, Felicia not realizing how close the two of them were, to the point that she believed she was tighter with Jag than Matt was. I mean, it took some level of delusion on her part to believe that, but apparently Jag did a good enough job also making her think that.
Yeah, I mean, it goes. I think there's a universal thing, and I remember my pops he always told me it was a secret kept is better than a secret told, and we see this play out with Felicia, and then we kind of see this play out with Matt and Jag, where there's an information train where they try to keep between themselves, and I know Jag had some troubles when he would go to America, tell her something, and she would tell other people, and there was a train of that going on. But I want to say in this specific thing, because like you said, if we're treating them like a duo, I think that's a really apt way to tackle this because you had Jag really take certain actions and you had Matt at points sweep up these things. And Matt really was a secret holder. He made sure that the thing coming to him, he didn't whisper around. He was the one saying, let me think about this. And then he would act on it as it was himself. And so you saw this way they were able to kind of stabilize each other. It did not feel like it was an overplay by any means because you had one person going this way and you had one person saying, hey guys, don't worry. I think in every group of friends, you have that one friend where you have to sometimes unfortunately apologize for them. Like he's just being dumb. He's kind of a little stupid. He's a little crazy right now. Don't worry about it. And people will laugh at it. That person by themselves will get annoying after a while, but the other person combined with them makes it a fun, good duo. That's what you had here. And so when you have certain angles, when you overwork it, but you have someone over there trying to, I don't want to say underwork it, but they're overworking the other angle, it kind of cancels out.
Yeah, and that's exactly it. Jag had some problems with this rule earlier in the game, which helped lead to his original eviction. And then he did keep it up, but he had Matt sweeping up for him, like you said. As for Bowie Jane, I went on pretty long about how she didn't scheme and plot. So it's pretty clear she didn't do it too much. So let's just go into the third rule, which says players need to be flexible. So how do you think Jag did here?
It's funny we say this because within our rules, be flexible. We've kind of had a back and forth thing in where I feel like to be flexible, you have to be challenged in a nature to show your flexibility. In Jag's thing, ironically, I don't think he was the most flexible in a lot of ways.
I agree with you on that one.
And the reason why was because he didn't have to be flexible. I mean, he made he willed his will was his might. He was Midas, where everything he touched was gold, and that was his veto and competition ability. He was able to be a ruler with power. He had the nuclear warfare behind him because, I got the veto, I got the H switch. What are you going to do? And each week, it gets harder for you to beat me. And so he didn't have to change his will there. I mean, I guess we can talk about the flexibility in the same nature of maybe Matt convincing him with the Corey in America and how to get, and then
I don't even consider that flexibility. I just consider that Matt convincing him.
It's the logical decision at that point too. Right. So in this aspect, he wasn't flexible, but after he got out, he didn't have to be flexible anymore because of his win. So. What is your take on this, David?
Yeah, I mean, early in the game, he was pretty inflexible. He didn't change his game even after being voted out, but he eventually started to figure things out, like we mentioned. He wasn't. So this is where I would say that he was flexible. So it's a slightly different view on things than what you were saying, because he stopped being hung up on things like loyalty, except when it came to Matt. And that freed him to play the game a bit more, because he told Dalton Ross, there was just a shift in my mindset at the beginning of the game. I sucked. I was loyal to a fault. And I decided I can't play that game. I can't represent my entire community. I can only represent myself and in the best light possible and hope that it portrays my community in a positive light. And so that's when I decided I'm going to still play loyal, but I'm going to play loyal to one person, and that person was Matt. And so that is how I showed who I am and showed my character and representing my community while still being able to play the game without just being like, fine, vote me out because I feel bad about getting everyone out. So, and that was part of it. He came in wanting to represent his community, and he played badly in part because of it. The flexibility was that so many people come into the house and determine they're going to play a certain way.
Mm-hmm.
And they play that way come hell or high water. It was good to see Jag recognize that he was trying to do too many things. Like, you need to play for yourself,
Mm-hmm.
and that is part of what is good about the greater diversity is not every individual comes in thinking I have to play for my community. Now, he was the first of his community, so it still felt that way more, but you still need to play for yourself. And it was good to see Jag recognize all of this. He had to focus on the game aspect. And that, I think, was the flexibility that he showed in his mindset there.
I like that take a lot, actually. I think it's interesting the way you put it there, because something we don't really know is that the level of responsibility, and we don't have to note this in this our rules, but I think just outside looking in is that there's such a level of responsibility when you come in representing a marginalized group of people who really haven't played the game. There's, Jag is our first, winner, our brown winner from, South Asian descent. I mean, it is so cool. And I was so happy. That's why I didn't really mind my winner pick, Matt, not winning, because I was so happy for Jag. But ironically, when you try to play a game because you have the, you're so many people on your back where you don't want to make them upset, it's difficult to actually play a game to help that representation win. I mean, if anything, when he lost and came out, like in the beginning, when he was voted out and he's like, I'm playing for myself. If anything, he probably made his community even more proud because he was able to win because he played a game where this is how you win. He wasn't shackled by it. So, again, there's levels of empowerment you get from it, but at the same time, you're thinking of so many things. I mean, I just remember when I was going to house, I thought of so many things that initial first few days because I was like, I don't want to do this. I don't want to do that because I don't want to have a bad image out there and how I'm viewed and yada, 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 It's freeing. And that's a good way. He was flexible. And he was a little phoenix that rose there. How do you feel, though, about his partner, Matt, in this aspect?
Well, I was going to ask you that, but I think that this goes back to something that you had talked about earlier. I think he had to be the most flexible of anyone because being deaf put him in such a different position compared to the other players. As he and others have mentioned, it's a game of whispers. You said it too. And he can't hear whispers. And he especially can't hear it when there's several people whispering. And, that put him at a disadvantage, and such that he had to figure out ways around it. One of the biggest was he was like, okay, I'm taking over the have-not room. And I'm sleeping there because that's where most people didn't want to go. So it allowed him to have easier one-on-one conversations. And that was one of his ways of adapting. Now, of course, he had to adapt in other ways as well. And I think he clearly did a very good job of adapting through the game.
Truly impressive. Truly impressive. I mean, the noting of the whole, have not room, that being a full strategy of it. I just, it's kind of sad because I am very happy Jag did win in so many ways, but also Matt played a very masterful game that I think has gotten with the whole cloud of Jag's like competition wins and his final end game, played a very masterful game that I'm hoping the house kids can look back at, and when they watch things, if they do, and realize what Matt had. And I don't even think that a lot of the viewers, because the show didn't show all these aspects of it, where Matt really was trying to figure out the best path forward and what side hit him, because he was good with every single person. To be good with every single person, you need to figure out a way to navigate that whole thing. I mean, I think also to be able to get Sari out, him making that final decision essentially, but still getting her vote out shows his level of, hey, this is what I had to do to win the game. I mean, he basically did everything he could perfectly to that point to win the game. Because hindsight's 2020, you can't tell that Jag is going to be this competition beast, and win basically everything and have no chance to get him out.
Yeah. I mean, there are some things he could have still done to win the game, and we'll get to those. But yes, I understand what you're saying. As we move to Bowie Jane, I would say that she was both completely inflexible and also had the ultimate flexibility. She was inflexible because she wanted to play a different game with different rules, and she got upset when people actually tried to play Big Brother. She had the ultimate flexibility because she was willing to go with literally anyone who would have her as long as they treated her as part of the team.
Yeah, I guess she is a double a double warrior on that one. It's with Bowie Jane. I mean, it's interesting. I think the pathway of this season, right, between Jag and her was like, you make your will happen. Like, stick with the strategy, don't go away from it, and it'll work its way out. And that worked for Jag. And for Bowie Jane, she got her mission. Her goal was to basically get these folks out, and she willed it to happen.
Yeah. Yeah. So what are your thoughts about Felicia then?
I mean, I think this Final Four is probably one of the most inflexible Final Fours we've probably had in a very long time. I mean, things worked out for them because of so many circumstances and ways, especially for Felicia. I mean, we saw, like you said, I mean, she's talked and gave all these secrets, and she really wasn't able to navigate in a way or take a punch and then just figure out a way she wanted to work with it. I mean, the whole situation, her blowing up on Corey, and we see that it's just not working in a good way for her, and she doesn't pivot. I mean, I really do think part of her game, her flexibility completely just died when Nicole was taken out. I think that was her person and her partner where she felt that she could maneuver and be one way or the other if she had somebody like Nicole, but outside of that, it wasn't there. But I guess the argument against it was she was so wishy-washy in ways. Do you feel that was flexibility? Do you feel that that's the case for it?
She tried. She, like she was working with Cirie, and then she wanted to, as we talked about, make a final two with Jared instead, which was obviously amusing. And then later she wanted to make one with Jag. And I think, just as we discussed in the second rule, she wanted to be flexible, but she didn't go about it in a very stealthy manner.
Flexible, but not successful.
Yeah, exactly. All right, well, we can go to the fourth rule, which says players should not let their emotions control them. And we'll start here with Jag again. And I'm going to refer back to some of what we already discussed about how he was playing somewhat emotionally early and then realized he couldn't do that. So he switched up his game. By the end, he was cutting people he considered his friends. And we saw how some of them reacted to that, America, because he knew he needed to do it for his game. And yes, he still had difficulty with these people. Like, they would try to talk to him and get straight answers, and he wasn't good at all about that, but he still went ahead and made the decision, at least until his final four and final three decisions. The clear, correct answer strategically was cut Matt. We all saw it. Everybody saw it. Cut Matt, take Felicia or Bowie Jane to the end, win easily. But that was the case when Jag allowed his emotions to control him, or rather, that decision was when he reverted back to that. He had been loyal to Matt all this time. He was willing to give up $675,000 to remain loyal and true. And I just want to point that out because Julie kept saying it's a $750,000 decision. No, it's not, because the second place person gets 75. But the fact that it ended up working for him does not mean it was right, does not mean we should shrug it off. That is hindsight bias. And also, we don't want to encourage this in future players. He had no way of knowing that several of the jurors would change their minds at the roundtable discussions or about that time. He had heard from others that several of the jurors, like Corey America Blue, had left, indicating they were voting for Matt. He knew Cirie was going to vote for Matt. If all of those had stayed, that would have been it. He loses. And he acknowledged in interviews that he took Matt to the final two, knowing that Matt would probably win. He got lucky because they changed their minds after he basically had no say in it. And no, it wasn't because of the speeches. We'll get to that later, and no matter what the outcome was or it ended up being, it doesn't matter that he ended up winning. The correct path was to take Bowie Jane or a backup of Felicia to the end. But he let his emotions interfere in that decision.
Okay, so lot said right there. I want to break it down and give my opinion, okay, on this situation right here. I actually think Jag, he let his emotions control him from the beginning and all the way through it. I don't think there was actually a moment where he didn't let his emotions control him. I don't exactly mean this in a bad way. What I do think, though, was beginning game, we saw it wasn't good for him. Middle game and end game, he let his emotions fuel him and he used that to his ability. I kind of liken it to, there was a recent doc that came out on Tom Brady, where he talks about when he was on that field, he just would let anything the opponents say fire him up. He'd be like, what did he say to me? How did he say that? Did he say something about my teammate? He would just, he made things up in his head to feel it. And I think with Jag, we saw that help him from
he needed
trying
Felicia.
to build.
She would have been on the sidelines making things up for him.
Yeah. I mean, he villainified the other side, Sari and Co. to the other groups, American Court. He trying to build it up as there's kind of big baddies, and we need to take these people out one by one. He was trying to basically say that use his emotions and garner his troops, and then also use his emotions with Bowie Jane. I really think they fed into Bowie Jane to be with them, be like, you're part of our group, not them. I mean, the thing that changed was that emotions at that point, since he was in a power play, really worked well for him. They started seeing him as that leader, that person that could push through that shield because of who he was. And then it gets to the point where it's the end game, and I know you say lucky. I think it's a risk calculator, right? I think the risk of Matt winning is so much higher than Bowie Jane winning. So it's what you navigate right there to it. But ultimately, we have to objectively look at it. It's a bad decision to ever take anybody like Matt. You compare your resumes one by one, and if you want to win the game, that's our goal. And yes, he did win, power to him. But if you play a simulation 100 times over, what happens? And more than anything, as we do this whole thing, I hope the viewers and listeners think about it. And if they didn't appreciate Matt's game beforehand, I hope they appreciate Matt's game now, because it's been a very complete game as we go through each of these rules. And I think if the jury was able to see some of this, I'm not saying Jag would lose, but I think it would be a very close battle.
Yeah. It's like, I mean, just to, again, to hammer this point home, it's like, you're in a baseball game. It's the 9th inning. You're up by 1 run. There are 2 men on. There is a guy up to bat who is well known to hit home runs off of fastballs down the middle. You don't throw a fastball down the middle. Now, maybe you do, and he swings and he misses. Okay, and the game is over, and congratulations. That still doesn't mean it was the right thing to do. It means you got lucky. And that's the same thing here. I mean, Jag took that fastball and he threw it right down the middle. Matt didn't hit it. And so, but again, we kind of are acting like the coaches in this, for the future. You pull that pitcher aside, you say, don't ever do that again. You got lucky this time. So future players, don't do this. This could have easily been a Cody Derrick situation. It's just that, well, Matt was no Derrick. Now, going back to before the end game, I think that Matt was similar to Jag, except that he realized he needed to turn off his emotional decisions even sooner, probably after the first couple weeks. Another difference is that although he said he would have taken Jag to the end, just as Jag took him, all signs pointed toward him having the edge. So it's a little bit different. But that said, I still say he should have taken the easier path if he had won. By bringing Bowie Jane if he had the option. And indeed, we saw what the results were of that final showdown between them. Now, he never had the choice, so we can't 100% say, well, he was wrong. But even in interviews, he said, no, I absolutely would have taken Jag. So unless he was just trying to make it look better and he was really trying to take planning to take Bowie Jane, then... Yeah, but I don't think so. I think he would have absolutely made the same incorrect decision.
Really? I think, it's hard to say, because I feel like Matt played the game in a very level head in most ways. I mean, yes, he this and that he was saying and things like that, but game-wise, he was kind of a silent assassin in the way he tried to operate each mode. I think he does cut out Jag at the end for the win. And I just don't think anyone, we'll never know, but I just don't think anyone honestly would, now that you got second place, you're not going to be like, oh, I won't take the winner. I think you would just, in these interviews, he wants to keep his relation with Jag. They're friends, obviously. So it's one of those things you just better said not to say, because you're not going to win anything.
That's true.
But yeah, this is a cautionary tale. It doesn't matter. Like, you never know the result, and the game it doesn't matter. TV, it doesn't matter. There's no glory. There's no money in being a strong final two. 5 years down the line, 10 years down the line, no one's really going to think too much of it. What they're going to remember and what you're going to appreciate and your family's going to appreciate is that money in your bank account.
Yes, exactly. Now, for Bowie Jane herself, let's face it, her whole game, if you can call it that, was emotion. She wanted to play with the good people. She didn't like lying. She thought alliances were cheating and so on. So she just wanted to play happy fun time house.
Yeah. It's complete again. It's on a total different rule set she's playing for, and it's probably because of the emotions that she had with it. And that's what she never tried to separate it. That wasn't part of her game. Her game was to play like this. Yeah.
And then we have Felicia, who definitely showed her emotions throughout the game. And yet she kind of split the middle in terms of allowing it to affect her gameplay. For example, she was nominated so many times, and she told Dalton that she believes she was the easy pawn because she didn't hold grudges, and that she also survived because she handled it well. But we know that wasn't always the case, because you already brought up one, like once Bowie Jane, had messed with her, that was it. Bowie Jane was out. And, she blew up at Corey in America, despite the fact that Corey had saved her, like, what was it, a week or two earlier?
Yeah.
And then, that's where the other part comes in, because she got it into her head. She could not trust Corey. And much like the Bowie Jane situation, she could not let it go no matter what he did. At one point, he made a pitch to her, and she flat out said, I have always felt like I can't totally trust what you say. I want to believe you, but I know you're good at what you do. And the thing is, and this is something we discussed on the Why Corey Lost podcast, so often when people wouldn't believe him, he was actually telling the truth. And he was in this case, but she could not get past her emotions about him.
Yeah, I mean, we're seeing a common trend. Some of these rules are all being similar to them in this way. Like, emotions ruled for Felicia. I mean, she played it that way. And I think the difference between her and Bowie Jane in this aspect is Bowie Jane had full surety this is how she wanted to play. She knew emotion. She wanted to play emotionally. She did play emotionally. Felicia, I think she was under an assumption she wasn't playing emotionally. Yeah. And unfortunately, that was just part of who she was. It could have been just a long battle of attrition, and that's kind of what got her eventually, just kind of broke her. But it comes down to, you don't have a game. If you don't have a plan at the end, your logical reasoning is kind of going to go out more so, and you're going to start trusting your, heart instead of your head.
Right. All right, well, we could go to the fifth rule, which says players need to pretend to be nice and play the social game. I want to start with Matt here, because he was clearly better at this aspect of the game. We've discussed some of it in terms of how he got in good with people, and indeed, he had better individual relationships, than probably anyone else. He was also better able to read a room when it came to those relationships, such as when he helped form that 3-person alliance with Jag and Sari to stop Jag from asking too many questions, or when he walked in a room and saw Jag pushing Bowie Jane to go up as a pawn, despite the fact that she was clearly upset about it, and he put a stop to it. Plus, Matt was able to make moves while avoiding repercussions because of his social game. Like, he won the veto in the double elimination, which wasn't a double elimination, and a double eviction. And he didn't save Jared. And yet people still were like, oh, okay. They just trusted him in a way similar. It was a mirror image of the way people distrusted Corey all the time. They just trusted Matt all the time.
Yeah, he had that good knack about him where he was able to make people feel really comfortable. And I hate saying it like this, because I just, from a moral and viewer perspective, I don't like it. But I do think it's important to note that he was nice when he needed to be, but he was also kind of a little ugly when he needed to be with some groups. I'm not saying that you should have been, but he was able to vilify other people with other group setting. And that created a band mentality, whereas us versus the others. And so he was able to otherize people and also be kind to them in different group settings. So he played both sides of it game-wise in a way to get him farther in the game. Again, we don't reject the idea that you need to do that to win the game, but he was able to be a chameleon in every setting we saw.
Yes. And we heard from other players that Matt was the best when it came to this aspect of the game. Blue said at the jury roundtable that Matt played a more manipulative game while making them feel comfortable. Corey said in a camera talk that Matt was the best player in the house for this reason, and it wasn't even close. Matt himself told Mike Bloom, I believe that I had a better social game with the jury and everyone in the house. And I would agree with all of that. So I think we can move to Jag.
Mm-hmm.
I would say that he was well liked and able to maintain friendships with some people, even then they were working against each other on a strategic level. But he didn't have a great social game. He wasn't especially good at the pretending part. In fact, he was pretty terrible at hiding his thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
We mentioned earlier when people would press him for answers, as they often would, because he kept winning things and therefore was in charge. He would do everything he could to avoid discussing it. And this led people to be upset that he wouldn't flat out tell them what was happening before he made his moves. You know, they'd be like, what are you going to do? Yeah, I'm still deciding. I mean, it got so bad that near the end, he was just avoiding people in the house completely.
Yeah, and this is a weird thing too, and I wonder if this was something that got him actually the win at the end versus Matt in a way, because Matt's social game was the way it was. Like you said, he was viewed kind of sneaky after the fact. You're like, wow, he snuck around. Mm-hmm. Versus Jag was more so of we were knights and we will fight. Like, my reasoning. I'm not going to pretend to you. And he was so straightforward with this that I wonder, do you think it endeared him to other people that helped him end game? I'm not saying it's a good social game by any means.
Yeah,
in that aspect, but
I mean, I don't know if I have this in my notes later. I can't remember anymore, but remember that I think it was Cherie did ask him in the final questioning, like, why did you pretend to our faces and then take credit for it afterwards? Why should we believe you? Mm-hmm. And he gave a decent answer to that, I think, and saying, well, the way this game went, it flipped, so I could never be sure. Somewhat decent answer. He could have been more forthright with that. So I do think they held it against him somewhat. At least some of them did. Now, another part of this rule that Jag wasn't great about was the way he kept bringing morality into it, but then would cut people and try to rationalize it away. And the problem is he was rationalizing it to himself. Those decisions would not convince the people he cut. And I think we may have talked about this last week or the week before. Like, it didn't end up coming back to bite him because most of the jurors looked past it. But if you have to rationalize, if you have to use morality to rationalize it, well, I'm cutting them because they're a bad person. They looked at me sideways. They stole the last brownie, whatever it is. You're not telling them that. You're only telling yourself that. So they don't know why you cut them. So, yeah.
It comes down to kind of what we talked about weeks before, that this jury, though, and these people in this house is kind of take a little bit more on the face. Like I feel like in the house, you could say things to them. You could kind of verbally slap them in ways, and they would just kind of be like, all right, we'll take it. Almost hit it you back. And I think that was reflected a little bit in the jury for that too, where they were a little bit more lenient on some things that past juries wouldn't have been.
Yeah. Moving to Bowie Jane. She didn't do a lot of pretending. She was either happy and laughing or upset and sulking and sometimes crying. And as friendly as she was most of the time, that wasn't game, because it would be cheating to pretend to be friendly when you really weren't.
Yeah, I mean, she needed people to pretend to be friendly with her for her to go this. It was not a,
Right. Felicia was an interesting case because she was often so blunt in what she said and felt. There were certainly some times when she had to do some pretending to be nice, but more often than not, she wore her emotions on her face. As for her social game overall, I'd say that was the majority of her overall game. We discussed already that she wasn't a hugely strategic player, but she did have a lot of social relationships, and those paid off for her over time in the game, though, of course, that stopped in the final four.
She was able to work her way through the game because of her social elements. I mean, you get to that place. I mean, final four, Also coming as an older house, because I think that has to be noted, just because socially it's so much harder for you to bond with people of different life experiences and ages. So she was able to do that. But like we said, that you have to use that social game eventually to help you out with other methods, and she wasn't able to do that.
Yeah. All right, we can go to the 6th rule, which warns against being too much of a threat. And this was definitely something that loomed large in the minds of Jag and Matt in particular. We already discussed how Matt said one reason he saved Jag was to use him as a shield. And indeed, one thing we've talked about and seen before, both on Big Brother and even more on Survivor, is the question of when should one threat go after the other. You don't want to do it too soon, because then the threat dominoes start falling and you could be next. You don't want to wait too long, or else someone else will get the jump and take you out. Big Brother's a little different if you are specifically a comp threat, because of the way the game favors comp threats. So if you show your true colors in comps too soon and then you lose one, people take the opportunity to get rid of you. We saw that. But comps are also how you wield power in the game. So we know Matt said he didn't want to be seen as a threat early, and he implied that he perhaps threw some of the comps then. Corey even said that Matt had a superpower where he could lower his threat level despite being an Olympian. Jag was seen as a threat in that way compared to the likes of Heisem, or I'm sorry, wasn't seen as a threat initially compared to the likes of Heisem and Cameron, and didn't really come into his own until some of the bigger fish had been removed from the pond. And then, thanks to the structure of the game, a bit of help from stupid twists like the supposedly invisible HOH, it no longer mattered that he was a comp threat because he was winning all of them.
Yeah, it's one of those ones that you have to lean one way or the other, and you have to choose your timing within, once you become a comp threat, you can't really take that back. If you try to step it back, that's always going to be in the back of people's heads. So you have a chance to just lean into it, and you just make your threat bigger. And that was kind of what Jag utilized in his strategy. I mean, he knew when he was voted out that I'm going to come back I'm going to be a threat no matter what. And he played the same game he did. He didn't try to lay low very much. And then when he started winning competitions, it wasn't one of those things. He never felt like he could ever throw a competition. And again, like we said, we don't objectively like that because it's not replicable for most players.
Right.
So it's not exactly the most winning strategy. But for Jag in this instance, he utilized that for his best bet. He used him as a shield, and he also used the threat of other people like Sari as a bigger social threat to convince others from the other side, Corey and America, like, hey, she's a bigger threat than me because socially this is that. And also the threat of American Corey being a duo kind of eclipsed his threat as a competition win, because it wasn't at that point. He was winning them, but not every single one.
Right. And of course, there's an even bigger way to be a threat, and that is the idea that you're going to win at the end. And, I mentioned earlier that Corey, America, and Blue all said in their later days that that Matt was doing a really good job. And Jag eventually heard about it. Like I said, Jag should have cut Matt for that reason. And similarly, Matt should have cut Jag at Final 5 to prevent Jag from winning the final comps, and, the risk that Jag could have cut him like he should have. But neither of them could bring themselves to do it. So you had these people who were threats, but then the others didn't take the actions that they should have.
If anything, I think Matt has to win this category of managing threat level in the best way possible, because he was still taken to the final 2.
That's true.
He managed a way to convince Jag, when we know his threat level is so high that every player knows there, that he really was never truly put on the block. I don't count final 3 because you don't win your combo. You have to be put on there. He managed it in such a way and played a game where people knew how good at the game he was, but was never a threat of going home.
Yeah. Now, the reason that Matt and Jag should have both cut each other was, of course, that Bowie Jane was absolutely zero threat whatsoever. She said earlier in the game, I've definitely been trying to hide my lawyer brain. You succeeded. Though I've said before on other podcasts that over 30 years of experience working closely with lawyers has taught me that just because someone is a lawyer, it does not automatically make them smart. I know it's a trope. I know it's a reality TV thing. Like, if I tell them I'm a lawyer, that means they'll think. No, it does not mean that. Trust me. when we look at what some of the jurors said about Bowie Jane, we could see how easy it would have been to beat her. America wanted to go to the end with her and told Dalton Ross that she was totally oblivious of anything going on around her. Quote, obviously, I thought I had the best chance of winning against her. When Mike Bloom asked for brief descriptions of each house guest, he asked Blue about Bowie Jane, and Blue's response was, who? Suri used a few more words to say that Bowie Jane did what everyone else wanted to do and didn't make any decisions on her own. Former winner Andy Herron said on Twitter, it is actually such a testament to how horrible of a player Bowie Jane is that she may go the most days without never being nominated of any house guest in history, and she still has 0% chance of winning. Truly impressive, atrocious gameplay.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing else to be said.
I've left Ovi speechless. I have just left speechless.
Yeah, it's just, man, we have to go through every rule for her because she's a player on here. We have to do just, but man, oh man, like,
yeah. I mean, I mentioned that I mentioned earlier that she had, said other things in her interview. So she told Dalton Ross she was happy that people had that impression of her. And her aim from the start of the game was that she would not be seen as a threat. She further claimed she knew exactly what she was doing. Every move she made was on purpose, and the fact that people thought this about her meant she did a good job. Let's pretend for a moment that any of this is true. Let's give her the benefit of the doubt and say, wow, you were pretending. First, give that woman a damn Emmy. Okay? That's the first thing. Second, what did she accomplish by all of this? She got third place. No more money than anyone else in the jury. By all rights, she should have gotten $75,000 for second place. But that would have required, speaking up on her own behalf, as we discussed earlier. So if she was purposely doing this, it was still a failure in terms of playing the game because she could literally never win. And, of course, I don't honestly think it was all on purpose anyway.
Maybe with a strategy just to win $75K,
Well, but then she failed.
She failed at that one, but maybe that was the goal. 75K is better than a lot of other money, so maybe she's...
yeah, but, either way, she failed.
Maybe that should be the goal. A house guest should come in the house and say, I just want 75K, guys. Let me do the Bowie Jane route. And then it's an easy payday. You stay on there and,
Well, a lot of people thought that's what she was doing. But then when she didn't get that, she was still just as happy. So
I'm going to give you my vote. I just think it's so funny when Jag was like, Bowie Jane, I still hope you vote. Like, I'm voting you out, but I expect your vote. And she's like, I'm true to my word. Like, fight for the 75K at least.
Yeah. All right, well, we can finish up this rule with Felicia, and I think we can summarize her threat level by just the number of times she was nominated but not evicted. Even when she was sitting right there and people could have easily gotten rid of her, they didn't because they didn't see her as a threat. Time and time again, we talked about, well, this person was voted out because they were more of a threat than Felicia. For a while in the early game, I actually thought she might be a potential win or a potential threat to win at the end just due to her personality. But after 100 days in the game, that just wasn't going to be enough. The only person she could beat at the end, and we had this debate before, was Bowie Jane.
Yeah, I mean, even in that case too, I mean, her threat level was only at the end because it was just you had her and Bowie Jane,
Right.
I mean, there was nothing else there to be there. So, I mean, this is where you have to be cut. It's not existent.
Yeah, she was literally kept around the longest because she was the lowest threat level of anybody but Bowie Jane.
Yep. Exactly.
So yeah. All right. Well, the seventh rule says to trust almost nobody. And we've discussed trust a lot over the course of this podcast so far. In the third rule, I mentioned how Jag told Dalton Ross about his shift in mindset from trying to be loyal to everyone to just being loyal to Matt. And indeed, that goes along with this rule because he kept trying to trust people who would then stab him in the back. It wasn't working. It took being evicted and then almost being evicted again for it to really hit home. But eventually he got there and realized that Matt was really the only one he could trust. And of course, he eventually added Bowie Jane into that as well.
Yeah, I mean, the whole combination of it all is just you don't really see it very much, and I don't know. It's just impressive that we had this final four of people get to the end and play such similar but different games in a disparity. I mean, do you think there's been a disparity like this that we've seen in a final four in recent seasons?
I can't think of any. Doesn't mean no, but I sure can't think of any.
Yeah.
Yeah. As for Matt, I think he generally did well with this rule. Even being more social in his gameplay, he wasn't just trusting what everyone else said. So I think he was okay here.
Yeah.
So then we moved to Bowie Jane, and well, she trusted people till they lied to her. Then they were basically dead to her because, that made them horrible people. But she also trusted Jag to take her to final two and still gave him her vote when she didn't, or when he didn't. So, yeah. And then finally we get to Felicia, who managed to be at polar opposites at the same time. With some people, she went a bit too far in the distrust side because we already mentioned how she wouldn't trust anything Corey said. And the same thing seemed to be true with Suri at times. But when it came to Jag, she believed every word he said, even when there was plenty of evidence that he was lying, as we discussed. I think by that point, most of it didn't matter because she really couldn't have done anything. Even if she had listened to Suri, there wasn't really anything she could have done. But she could have had more opportunities if she would have listened to them at times earlier in the game, and she just would not believe them.
Yeah, I mean, I think that was the difficulty of it, where she just was kind of the other side of things, where we talked about house guests, where it's we don't want you to trust anybody, but we need you to trust some people. And also telling secrets to people isn't trusting. You're giving that ability away. It's the opposite of it. Like I said earlier, trust, a secret kept is better than a secret told. And so we just saw her kind of lose any trust with anybody to be able to take it because she was giving away so much.
Yeah. All right, well, we can move into Appendix A, which is about the jury phase. Here we are.
Woo.
Let's talk about Felicia first, since she was out on Sunday, and so she had a few days to think in the jury, and of course was part of the roundtable. Now, Cameron said in his interviews that when she showed up, she was fresh out of the game and wrong about everything she thought was going on there. So the rest of them had to explain it to her. Now, normally, since this came from Cameron, I'd wonder if it was really true. But we talked earlier about how she saw so many things wrong in the game and was absolutely convinced of them. So in this case, I'm gonna accept Cameron's take on it. Indeed, her vote for Matt after being so close to Jag at the end makes me think that she still thought she was closer to him than she actually was until everyone explained what happened. So I think she may have perhaps felt hurt enough by that to switch her vote. Now, it didn't end up mattering, but that was definitely one of the risks of the way Jag handled things, by making her think consistently that she was really tight with him and then cutting her. And then she gets to the jury and the jury are like, yeah, he was never close to you.
Yeah, I mean, from all the interviews and we're seeing like that, it's kind of a pretty clear story about how the jury felt about them. I mean, I think we saw a jury that I'm interested with, because I wasn't sure. It felt like they were going to be a bitter jury, to be honest. I felt like the feelings they might have would be go in there. But what we did see was that they just put a bigger onus on competition wins, and overall, they saw the lack of social game. They tried to give people points where they could, if they could. Even if there was a lack of social game, they tried to give, Bowie Jane some aspects of that. And I love how the editing, when you're in the jury roundtable, they kind of show how close it can be. Oh, they could have this, when we know what the reality could be.
Yeah. Yeah. I never thought that they were going to be a bitter jury. I thought that there were too many people in there for games. And also, I don't like the term bitter jury in general, because I see too many people, and I'm not saying you were, but I see too many people throw it around. Like people were saying on my prediction video that I posted, they were like, they're going to vote this way, and if they don't, it's just because they're bitter. It's like, okay, so basically, if they don't vote the way you want them to vote, random viewer, that automatically means they're bitter. And, so I would have discussions, and, these people
Mm-hmm.
mostly were not thinking very rationally. And that's the way it usually is. It's, if they didn't vote the way I wanted, that means they're bitter. And, in this case, I'll talk a bit. I'm going to save most of my thoughts on why people may have switched to the conclusion. But in this case, I do think that there was switching. Let's talk about Bowie Jane a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I don't really know what to say. Just like the rest of the game, she had no real plan. She had dropped some information and goodbye messages about how she was, and this is her plan to win at the end. She has mentioned she was in this alliance with Matt and Jag, but so what? It wasn't like she was going to make people think she was the secret mastermind. And then when she ended up on the jury, she asked literally the dumbest final two question ever. Literally.
I was waiting for you to mention it.
No doubt. It has already become a meme. The only reason that I did not open this podcast with it is because it has already been done all over the place. It used to be, and I'd swear it was right up including last year, I would complain because the person who was voted out in third place would come out there and Julie or one of the other jurors would hand her a card. They'd hand the person a card and be like, hey, here is your final two question that the jury predetermined for you. And we'd be like, well, that's not very fair. That third place person should get to ask their own question. This made me want to go back to the time when they predetermined the question.
She convinced you.
Just for her, because it was so dumb. So dumb.
That's so funny. That Bowie Jane might be the thing that might make you revert. Be like, oh, well, we might have had it good back then.
Yeah. Well, compared to her, yeah.
Yeah.
So let's talk about our final two. Getting to this point, we know this. I went into it believing, as many did, that Matt was the likelier winner. We've discussed why already, including what members of the jury had said in interviews and even said to the camera while in the house. But both of them should have done a better job in planting seeds in the jury's minds as the jurors went out the door. There were a smattering of things said in goodbye messages. I did not see anything I felt would really change minds. Did you?
You know what? I know we're going to disagree about this. I know we are, but I think the final plea of Jag, and I'm not saying they weren't already leaning Jag.
I'm talking about before then. I'm talking about
before then. Apologies. Sorry, I thought you were asking then. No, I think we didn't. The goodbye messages really weren't super like. I don't think they were like. For example, I think of Big Brother 19, Josh, where the one thing he did well, I felt like, was his goodbye messages, where he tried to instill like how good a player and how much he appreciated them. And the reasons he owned up why he had to get them out. And it was because of that versus Paul, who basically kind of lied to them on their way out. We didn't see that level of jury management from either Jag or Matt. My only thing I do feel bad about is that I do think they didn't take, as a group collectively, the goal to be nice to them. The following weeks they're leaving out, from Sari to Felicia, and to previous to that, because they were like, oh, you're leaving, and you're gonna be left with us, so for all mean to you, you don't have to worry about who you have to choose from being mean, or not. We're all equally there. True. And I think Matt, that's where he unfortunately failed a little bit more than Jag, because that was Jag's game. He was just blunt, he was going for it. Matt, for that part, socially was really good in all ways, so I just feel like he could have easily kind of like, sent them to heaven a little easier.
Yeah. And I mean, I think another thing that we need to discuss before we even get to the final, because this is something they, was, I'm certain, in their mind, is, and we've mentioned it, but we haven't really delved into it, was that Jag had a very big strike against him. He'd been voted out. Matt had saved him. There was a lot of debate, both outside and inside the jury, as to how important this was in Big Brother. Because, Big Brother, the game is full of twists and buybacks and stuff like that anyway. Personally, I think they absolutely should have considered it. Along with the fact that he was almost voted out shortly after, but was only saved thanks to something he had nothing to do with. But I also don't think it's automatically disqualifying. Like, say, if you were on Survivor and spent most of the game on some sort of separate island and just came back with the jury telling you what to do.
That's strange. That would never happen.
No. Jag, as you mentioned, never left the house. I mean, all the votes went against him, but he was in the game the whole time. Would I personally want to vote against or for a winner who had been evicted? No, probably not. But I feel like another aspect was that Jag was voted out so long ago. It's like a distant memory. It was almost a whole normal length season of Big Brother ago that happened.
That's a really good point, actually, that I didn't even consider too much. Because for me, I consider that point that because there was Cameron on the jury, so he's not going to invalidate that, I feel like, for him personally, because he's like, then that would invalidate the idea if I came into the game. I also think even though she didn't vote for him, it might go to Sari a little bit because she knew Jared was voted out. He came back in. So there's these two people who have some level of connection to it. And the rest of them, just seeing how Jag played throughout the whole game, it could be something of that nature. And it wasn't such a big deal. But I think the point that you made is really important, that it was so early in the game. It was week 4, day 31, I want to say. And that in itself means that he played a good solid 70-ish days being in the house. And for them, I think a big mental thing is that he never left the house, like you said. It was something controlled, and almost it was kind of a knock on Matt, which is kind of ironic because he was the one who saved him. You know, the person saving him was next to him. So it's one of the things like, well, you utilized him to get to this further. Why can't Jag for that? So should we knock him?
Right. So with that under consideration, I do think Jag knew he had to come out hard and claim his game. So it wasn't all about Matt saving him. I think Jag knew that. The thing is, and this may be where we disagree, but if so, you're wrong. Most jurors, pre-stating it, most jurors have already made up their minds before they ever step foot back into the studio. It can take a lot to convince them otherwise. And you know, I mentioned that earlier in the segment about Julie being wrong when it came to Sari. I do think in this case, there was a possibility of a few people changing their votes, but only if Jag had screwed up and Matt had the stellar performance to explain and take credit for his game. And in fact, not only did neither of those things happen, the opposite happened. You know, you could tell Jag practiced for this moment. Matt had not. And one thing this appendix says is once you're actually ready to make those jury arguments, be prepared, practice, be ready to tell the jury why they should vote for you and not for the other person. As mentioned already, most of the juries will have made up their mind, and what you say has no bearing on them. This is already in the appendix. This is not just for this jury. But sometimes a win is decided by just 1 or 2 votes. So even if only 1 or 2 people are willing to change their minds, you have to give it your best shot. But Matt said in interviews he wasn't ready. He told Mike Bloom he's not good at Q&As on the spot, and there was a lot of pressure. He told Dalton Ross that he never really paid attention to what questions he would be asked, so he was very unprepared. This makes my head hurt just saying it. But the thing is, it certainly showed in the way Matt responded. The jury even in my opinion, tried to help Matt. Because instead of giving him vague questions, they asked some specific ones to see if he would take ownership of his game. They basically handed it to him and said, take ownership of your game. And he still didn't do it. Meanwhile, Jag had clearly thought things through and demolished Matt in the Q&A portion.
I mean, he ran him over. I mean, I think this is one of those things where it's game knowledge goes a long way in a sense that Matt had no idea how the end of the jury would work, you know, or in the sense of this is how it should be. I think his personality, unfortunately, is one of where he's not, I'm saying unfortunately, it's a good quality in almost all cases to be humble a little bit more about your abilities and things like that. He didn't take credit for it. He kind of still viewed it as a team thing. Whereas in Jag, in this aspect, it really, when he started that whole, you know, within the Q&A and his final speech, it gave me very King George vibes from Australian Survivor, his first season, where I think you'll understand that little reference. I hope some viewers and listeners gives you goosebumps. One thing I disagree with you about, though, is I do think that Yes, Matt might have been able to swim, but I feel like they felt much more neutral in the sense of where they were at, where these votes. I think Sari and Felicia votes were there. I think America / Core, and I think Cameron's vote was on Jag no matter what. Blue probably on Jag because of the relationship. I think America, Corey, I think they could have swung either way. Because I think Corey appreciated Matt's game in a lot of ways from the social part of it. And America also appreciated it too. But when they wanted a winner, everyone wants a winner of their season they feel like deserves it and beat them. That's, I think, something. There's some players and people saying, I don't like that and things like that. But I think most people want to feel they got beat and the best player won it. And I think they did feel that Matt had that ability and he was there, but I think that Jag presented it in a way that I beat you. Like he presented the argument they wanted to hear, and that's what ultimately got it for them. I feel.
Yeah, I mean, I would bet you that, you know, if Corey and America, when they eventually do their deep dives or whatever else, I would bet you that they will say they came in there leaning heavily towards Jag.
Interesting.
I think
I
think they left before. I think they left thinking Matt, but then things changed, and I'll get to more of that. Some of it I've saved for the conclusion, for the big pop, you know. But we do have that final speech first. And this appendix specifically says, take ownership of your game. Be proud that you made it as far as you did. When you're making your arguments, you can't be afraid to throw your opponent under the bus. Jag heeded those words. Matt did not. I will say Matt's final speech started off okay. Not great, decent. Until he just kind of started rambling. He could have reached a conclusion and been done, but it was almost like someone said to him, oh, you have another 2 minutes, so go ahead and keep going. You know, sometimes you just have to conclude and be done with it. I remember, back when I was in college, and I was taking an exam. It was electrical engineering exam. I had no clue. You have 3 hours to do this exam. I was done in an hour. Why? Because I didn't know any of the answers. Okay? And so I got up, I turned in my test, and I left. And other people afterwards were like, how were you done so quick? And I was like, because I didn't know the answer. And there was no point in hanging around any further because I still wouldn't know. And it wouldn't have gotten me any further. And that's the way Matt was acting in his final speech. He was like, oh, Julie's not cutting me off. I guess I have to keep talking, and he did. And he just rambled. Following up on what he told Dalton, he added, I know in my heart that I played my best game and I got to the final 2 playing my game. I got there, so it definitely worked. Whether the jury agreed with it or not, that's up to the jury. But that ignores the fact that your goal should be to persuade the jury. You can't just say, well, it is what it is. You played 100 days. Take that final step. Think about it in a real trial and jury situation. You can't just say, well, I know I'm innocent, so if the jury believes me, great. No, there's a penalty for the jury not believing you.
I wonder, and I think from Matt's game, I mean, hindsight's 2020, right? I think of everything Matt has to deal with. I think head to head, it was always going to be more of a difficult thing to display his game versus Jag, right? Who is, eloquent with those type of things. But I also think that Matt, because he did play that under the radar. Jag didn't have to. He just needed to say what he did and take more ownership of other things. But his game is very visual. I wonder if Matt, during, like we talked before, the goodbye messages, other things, could have put a few seats. And I'm curious how much Sari advocated for him behind the scenes for it. Did she feel a certain way? Because that's something we were talking about, that we felt that Sari would be a big gavel point, a leader within the jury after it. But I wonder if Sari, from all of the jury videos we've seen, was just like, I'm sick of this, I'm done for this, didn't really try to fight for Matt. Because I think he needed somebody to explain his game or just highlight more points for the others to be like, I see it. I still feel like they did see it in ways, but obviously by the end of it, it was nowhere to be seen.
And they needed him to take ownership. So they needed him to say, I was doing this. I wasn't just being nice to you because I'm a nice person. I was being nice to you to advance myself in the game. And he didn't do that. He didn't explain what he did. But Jag did. He full on blasted the jury with his point of view. And as I was watching it, I did worry he went too far. He obviously needed to take credit, but I thought he went about it in too strong a way because it could have been seen as invalidating contributions from anyone else because he kept saying he single-handedly did things. He was the most dominant strategic player. He played masterfully and everything else. I mean, the jury knows those things weren't true. He didn't single-handedly do anything. He worked with people. And now, was Jag lying to the jury or and trying to fool them? Or did he believe he told the truth and owned his game, but he just had a different perception? I don't know. He told Dalton he didn't lie in his speech. But then there was a Big Brother Instagram post, which had Jag talking about his top 3 moments that carried him to the win. And he mentioned how himself, Matt, and Bowie Jane ran the second half of the game. So in other words, he was admitting it wasn't him alone. But either way, Marianne from Survivor, noted this on Twitter. You don't have to tell the truth in your speeches. No. I would actually be more impressed if he came out and said, yeah, I totally lied. I knew I had to lie. And, and he did. When Jag talked to Dalton afterwards, he said, I get really passionate. And I've always said you should advocate for yourself. And that was me truly advocating for myself. So I knew as I was giving my speech that I was getting passionate, but this is who I am. And it's funny because I've thought about myself in the shoes here, because part of me, like when I had job interviews, I had trouble talking myself up. Like no one likes to brag. Now I know sometimes on the podcast, I mean, I literally have a sign here that says, David, you're right.
David, you're right.
But that's the character. And in real life situations, yeah, I have more trouble, or at least I have historically, saying this is what I've done. This is who I am. But there are other times when I have definitely gotten passionate like that. There were times in my previous work life where like I was testifying at hearings and I got so worked up that I probably looked and sounded a lot like Jag. I mean, one time I was so mad at this witness who was lying and the way he was acting. I was just going at him. And I had my lawyer in my ear, like saying, calm down, stop it. And I couldn't. I was like literally seeing red. And finally, the hearing officer had to stop me. And that wasn't the first time that I got stopped by a hearing officer. So I understand how it can happen once the ball gets rolling. That doesn't mean it was great. I did think he went too far over the top, but it was balanced by Matt's weak, we did it together type of rambling. And of course, like I said, I strongly suspect the jury came in voting the way they did. I mean, you mentioned Corey. The looks, I haven't gone back to see for sure, but when I was watching, the look on Corey's face indicated almost that he was rolling his eyes at what Jag was saying. And that's why I thought right up until the moment that Julie read the votes that Corey was still voting for Matt. But Corey rolled his eyes and still voted for Jag. So that's why I don't think that the speech changed his mind. And, if Matt had owned his game, I do think things would have changed, but he didn't. And the other thing is, and I just want to say this to jurors, after a 100-day game, your decision should not be based on a single speech anyway. And it kind of shows it with Matt. If you truly believed that Matt played the best game for 100 days, should you really base your final decision on whether or not he could give a good answer to a question at the end? No, I don't think you should. And I don't think they did.
Yeah, I think with Jags, the sauce was strong. I think he put it on there, and it was maybe a little bit more gravy by the end with the Corey's reaction. I have to look back at that, but I do think it had a place in there. And it's kind of like, if you have the unfortunate to watch any presidential debates or anything like that, nowadays they give fact checking on those things. But before too,
sometimes
you can, and in these type of debates, you can basically make up whatever you want to say that sounds good. And all the viewers, 90% of them are going to remember what you said and keep that in their minds. They're not going to fact check. They're not going to that. The number's even bigger. Same thing in this thing. I love the idea of lying to the jury. You know,
Yeah.
I think there might be different ways to do it in a way that doesn't make it feel a little phony. I think Jag, he went strong, and I love seeing people's reactions like he's going to lose this because of the speech, and then it kind of turned around there. I think he gave the jury the type of thing they wanted. They wanted someone like that, where they got beat, they got taken down, and just the idea. And here's the thing is, I also think there's a level of emotional connect, and then your voting is so shortly after. There's not like a this to that. You're not taking your time to go to the ballot. You are so charged up. You're so amped. You see this guy in front of you who wants it, and you might make a decision that you've been swayed a bit because of that moment. You might be taken up in the moment.
I think some would. I don't think Corey is one of them. You know,
yeah,
and I also, you know,
I just think he was on the cusp. I really think he was leaning more Matt, and I just feel like, but I mean, it could come down to that he didn't own it, right? But I am so curious to see when they did the interviews.
Right.
I'm gonna shoot him a message right now. Hey, I know you just got out, but I need to know. We need to know. All right.
We need to know live on this podcast right now.
I know you probably need a lot of mental health services and everything else afforded to you at this point after coming 100 days out of here. But I need to know this.
Yeah. I mean, if we take my point of view and that the jury did come in knowing who they were voting for, then when and how did it happen? Because we've talked about Corey Blue in America favoring Matt as they left, and I think they were the key. You already said it. Cameron and Bowie Jane were always voting Jag. Sheree was always voting Matt. And we already talked about Felicia's probable switch. Sharon Tharp did an interview with Dr. Will between when he hosted the roundtable and when the finale aired. He said that minds changed during the roundtable. I heard that podcast. I just didn't expect it to be this much or those people. I thought, if anything, the minds changed the other way. And yet here we were. And so I'll leave the rest of my thoughts on that for the end in a few minutes here.
Yeah, I mean, overall, it's just interesting to see. I'm looking forward to the post series because I do think it has a big implications on future seasons and the way people will play the game with these competitions. Because here's the thing, the reality of it is, I know we're yelling at the show in ways about the competition and inequality, these things, but if the jurors are going to base their bets on it, if Jag winning out like that is what's going to always determine it, it doesn't matter what the show does. I mean, of course, the equality of the winning will be shared around there, but I think that's going to be the root of it, is how we view the game of Big Brother moving forward. Do we view it as a physical competition show, or do we view it as a social game element? Because it feels, no matter what if the competitions hold that much prowess in it, that's going to change the whole meta, the direction of how people play. So that's what I'm interested to see about, because I think, I don't know, as we break down these rules, and I hope our viewers and listeners can, they may disagree or agree with this, but I do think it's pretty evident that Matt's social game was probably the best social game we have had on this season, in that final four of people, It doesn't there. So where does Jag beat him out? Is it this competition wins, and how much of gravity is given to that? So I'm curious to see what the play out is.
Yeah, and so you've already started down this path here. So it is about time to wrap things up. Let's have your full final thoughts about Jag, Matt, Bowie Jane, and Felicia.
Oh, okay. I am probably still minority opinion. I really enjoyed the season in so many ways. I think it was a fun, dynamic season from the beginning. The middle part had a power shift of our favorites to unfavorites at points. And then we saw this battle. And I mean, again, I didn't really like how the levels of people went down, but I enjoyed seeing a matchup of Jag and Matt. I don't care how it went there. I think we saw two people who were both deserving to win the game at the final two. And again, objectively speaking, not the best decisions to have two people able to win the game at the final two, but as a viewer, I enjoyed the season. Being able to cover them, each of these people week in, week out, I really enjoyed that. This final four people, though, of Matt and Jag, impressive in their own ways. I hope that viewers can take each of their games and see how you want to and not to play. I hope you realize you should play for yourselves. You shouldn't play for 75K because you will not even get to 75K at many times. And I hope we see this level of I am such a big fan. I know I'm combining all of them, but of the Steven and JT game, where you have a duo of two people who are fools to one another and they make it through it. So I don't know. I feel like I gave my encompassing feelings on all of it, but I appreciate the games. I'll let you do the deep dive of how you felt about them.
Yes, buckle up. All right, Felicia, to start with, had a great run in the House, though she seemed to be in the nomination chair more than next to it. She had personality, she had fun, but she wasn't exactly a strategic mastermind, and her social game started to wear thin after a while. Under the current way Big Brother is produced, she had little chance to win challenges and get power, so that left her out in the cold. Bowie Jane was Bowie Jane. I think I've said enough about her in this podcast, so there is no mistake where I stand about her. Whoever put her on this cast should be fired. That brings us to our final two. Neither Matt nor Jag was a strategic genius, despite what Jag said in his final speech. But together they made a formidable duo. Matt played much more of a quiet social game, while also being behind many of the strategic decisions they enacted. But Jag was the face of those decisions, partially because he was winning the comps and therefore literally had to be the one saying who was nominated or vetoed or whatever, partially because Matt wanted to stay in the background, so Jag was his shield. Matt himself said in post-game interviews that he had the better social game, while Jag had the better competitive game. I would add that Jag's competitive game allowed him to be the face of the duo and claim the credit at the end, which he certainly did, while Matt shied away from it. Matt overcame a lot in the game, but the one thing he really needed to overcome was himself, which he might have been able to do if he claimed his game. Several jurors said at the roundtable. Cameron echoed it in his interviews. Matt did have a decent read on the jury. He told Dalton that he knew if the jury was going to vote based on who played strategically, it would go to Jag. Same thing if they if they voted based off of comps. But if they voted based off of social game and trusting, he would win. The problem was, as I said earlier, knowing that and doing something about it are two different things. He didn't push the jury to see things from his viewpoint. He went with more of a que sera, sera attitude. I mentioned in Appendix A that things came down to Corey, America, and Blue. Really, only two of them were needed to flip the outcome. Corey and America are both fans of the show. And I think that while they were in the house, they valued the relationship they had with Matt. Once they got out and started talking and thinking about it and discussing it, especially at the round table with everyone, I think that picture took a different shape. I believe they realized that they wanted to award the person who had more control in the game. And as we've discussed, that at least appeared to be Jag. Again, part of it was comp wins, but part of it was being the face of the duo. You know, you even mentioned earlier, there's this thought of wanting to be beaten, and you want to be beaten by the person who showed more control. But we also have to go back to something I discussed a couple hours ago in terms of the strategy the duo went with. They took out those, and by this duo, I mean Jag and Matt, not Corey and America. Sorry. They took out those who were the biggest comp threats. It's not a strategy I would normally have suggested, but this is life in Big Brother as it stands today. We can and should complain about it, but those complaints are directed at Big Brother production. Same if players are upset about, same if people, viewers, are upset about players being able to return to the game after being unanimously evicted. The jurors considered that and decided that alone did not make him ineligible. Jag played the game that was put in front of him. As America told Jag a few weeks ago, I was in the Big Brother house long enough to see Jag go from beloved underdog to villain. And he did. But sometimes those who are deemed the villains and who have blood all over their hands are also the ones who go on to win because they're seen as having done the most. And that is why Jag won and Matt, Bowie Jane, and Felicia lost.
Wow. That best monologue. I'm actually glad I just said what I said and let you took care of that part. You're usually much better at putting the words together for me, and you showed that right today. Yeah, that's a jury speech right there. Send him the votes. All right,
That's
let
right.
him write
Vote
your.
for me. Yes, I am the winner. Send me
David, maybe you should start a
$750,000.
business where you do help people with their jury stuff beforehand. If you want to go
Yeah,
Big Brother,
I
let
mean,
me help you with
yeah,
your jury things.
yeah, and yeah. So yeah, if people want that help, they can reach out to me on social media. I'll be happy to, for a fee, do that. Because yeah, we're all over the place on social media.
Truly, we are all over social media. You can find us discussing Big Brother, Survivor, and other topics on Twitter. I'm at the Ovi Kabir on Instagram. I'm at Ovi Kabir on TikTok. I'm at Basmati Boy. And David is truly all over the place. And right now, he's been doing double duty, but he won't have to as much. He's going to be focusing on Survivor and a few of his other shows. But you can find all of his information on his Linktree at Linktree/David Bloomberg. You can find him on most text-based social media like Twitter and Blue Sky at David Bloomberg. Video platforms like TikTok, YouTube, and Instagram, and Threads, because he's connected to Instagram, is at David Bloomberg TV.
Yeah, I've been on the video platforms, posting 3, sometimes 4 videos per day. Obviously, the Big Brother videos are fading. I have a few more to put up there, but I've got videos on Survivor, other shows like Traders Canada, Survivor UK, House of Villains, more on the way. There's a new show on. There's a new show on Amazon Prime that I'm going to dive into. There could be videos there. So, yeah, you mentioned that, this was my last week of double duty Why Blank Lost podcasting. And about a day before this podcast was released, my Why Blank Lost for Survivor 45 with Jessica Lewis as my co-host also came out. And that was a double elimination episode. Thanks a lot, Survivor, for scheduling that the same week as the Big Brother finale. And so we brought in reinforcements. We brought in Survivor 43 runner-up and Challenge USA badass Cassidy Clark as the guest. On top of those, I am still recapping and analyzing the Traders Canada on the Tradar podcast, which you can find that wherever you get your podcasts, spelled TRAIDAR. And you can also find it as audio on YouTube. Plus, I'm doing a special series for the Tradar podcast on Survivor UK, where I'm recapping alongside a co-host who is in the UK but has never seen Survivor before. So it's an interesting blend of thoughts, especially in this Survivor UK season, where a lot of it is back to basics in terms of the way people are thinking. I don't think you have any Bowie Janes there, but you definitely have some people who are thinking loyalty and that sort of thing.
Wow, some Bowie Jane stands everywhere, You never know.
They're still there.
And as we wrap up, I just want to encourage people to check out our RHAP patron program at robhasawebsite.com/patron. Rob has so many patron-only podcasts for Big Brother that I've truly lost count. So jump on board and support shows like ours and everything on the network by becoming a patron at robhasawebsite.com/patron.
And make sure you're subscribed to all of the RHAP podcasts by going to our YX Lost feed. You could subscribe to the Big Brother feed. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense to do right now, except that you're going to want to for the future. And if you subscribe to them, you'll get all the interviews that I'm sure Taryn and maybe Rob will have, the deep dives. So that's robhasawebsite.com/Big Brother. Or again, our YX Lost feed page, you can go to the RHAP ups and you'll get all sorts of other content there.
And finally, I want to thank Scott St. Pierre and the whole RHAP and reality TV wrap-ups behind-the-scenes team for all the work they do, editing and posting and everything else. They do so much, and we appreciate everything they do to get our voice from our microphones to your ears. And finally, 100 days, we've made it. Thank you to all the viewers and listeners for watching everything. I really do appreciate it. I've had such a great time with David. I appreciate him bringing me back as his co-host. I probably have annoyed him and disagreed with him for these last so many weeks right now, but we made it through 1/3 of the year. So, most likely will not be back for the reindeer games. I don't think we're good.
What? You're abandoning me for the well, that's because you're going to be on.
I'm going to be on it for the 100K against the legends of Big Brother.
Yes, obviously.
Yes. And but hopefully I'll be back by next season of Big Brother 26 if David hasn't gone too annoyed at me.
Absolutely.
Like always, just comment, let us know your thoughts and what you think of this final group of people, especially this final 2. So thank you so much for viewing and listening. And thank you, David.
Yes. And thank you for joining me once again through this whole enormous season. I want you to do something. Give yourself a double thumbs up. Let's see if we can get fireworks here. You got to get it on camera. You got to get them both on camera. No, they're not. It's not working just when we want it.
Wow,
okay. I was trying to get you fireworks for your birthday.
The whole season. I was waiting the whole thing to not do it.
So happy birthday once again. And yeah, I will be back with Jessica every week, continuing with Survivor Why Blank Lost. You and I will be back whenever a Big Brother season happens. It looks like it probably won't be till summer again, since the actor strike is finally over.
Yeah.
But you and I will talk, just maybe not in front of all these viewers and listeners. And they can see us on social media. They can see me in various other places. And when Big Brother comes back, we will be rested and ready to jump in. So
can't wait.
Till then, everyone. Bye.